All right, testing 1, 2.
Hey everybody, welcome to day 4 of Meridian. Sorry for the slightly late start. We had some technical difficulties, but we're back on track now. Today is the last day of live programming. That's right, tomorrow is networking day, which means that rather than offering panels and speakers, we're giving you the opportunity to mix and mingle, to network with people in your region, and to join the conversation in topic-specific roundtables. You can find it all under the Interactive Sessions tab of your Meridian dashboard. The sessions have limited seating, so if you see one you're dying to attend, make sure to sign up before it fills up. So fittingly, given that tomorrow is networking day, this last day of programming is focused on networks. What does it take to sustain, nurture, and grow a network? How can we, and by we, I mean everyone here, collaborate to build a network that creates global connections to solve real-world challenges? What can we do to spin the flywheel and get the network effects so crucial to Stellar's success? What solutions can an open participation network deliver today? And what about in the future? What is the future of the Stellar network in the year ahead and beyond? A lot of big questions, a lot of fertile ground for great conversations. Networks. To start the conversation about them, we have with us one of the most renowned network builders of all time, Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, and to shepherd that discussion, none other than SDF's CEO and Executive Director, Danelle Dixon. Welcome back to the virtual stage, Danelle.
Thank you so much, Justin. It's great to see you. Sorry about the technical issues. Hopefully I didn't cause them. I wanted to bring on Reid Hoffman. Reid is a friend of mine, someone that I've actually learned a lot from, and we worked together. He was on our board at Mozilla, and I am so grateful for all of the time that he's given me over the years and just the businesses that he's worked with. So thank you, Reid, for joining us today.
My pleasure and honor. And I learned a lot working with Mozilla from you too. I mean, all these questions around open source and governance and how to think about those things, those have been like, critical things for the future of our society, and you are instrumental there, and you're instrumental here.
Well, thank you. It's one of the things we were talking about before we were in the green room, when we talked about the fact that open source is one of those things that it feels like it's becoming more of the thing. And I know that your work with Microsoft and with Satya at Microsoft has really helped to push that forward. So thank you for that. Hopefully we'll see more momentum in that direction.
For sure.
Okay, so we've known each other for a while, but everyone here doesn't know that you're a crypto rap producer. I don't know if you want to talk about, back in 2019, you produced a battle rap music video with centralized and decentralized currencies, pitting Alexander Hamilton against Satoshi Nakamoto. What inspired you to do that?
So one of the things, I'm not as the earliest of crypto adopters, but a number of my friends are, and then they got me involved in it. Obviously, like many of us, starting with Bitcoin, and then kind of moving into more of the decentralized finance and other kinds of areas, and thinking about these things as platforms, which we'll get to. But I also, of course, given that I have a role as a venture capitalist, as a board of Microsoft, going to these kind of these high-scale business conferences, sometimes like society conferences about like what should be happening in society. What I was hearing a lot from the business side was a complete non-comprehension about the real ideas that were going on within crypto. The kind of things that the banking side was thinking is, oh, this is a get rich quick scheme. It's like equities that don't really have any backing. It's not really paying attention to what are the key things in banking that have to be part of this. And so what I realized, I said, look, what I'd like to do is elevate that discussion in a way that that had kind of like what are the ideas, to present them in a way that isn't kind of that classic like oh, we're boxing. But then I realized Alexander Hamilton, the musical, which like if people haven't seen, and they had these cabinet rap battles, like between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, and it was a way of expressing ideas and conflict. And I said, oh, this could be a really awesome way of getting some of the central ideas out there, so that people who could listen to it and go, oh, okay, I get it. I get some of the questions that are being there, and it's a question of ideas, not these guys trying to get rich for society, these guys standing for society, but two different ideas about what could be really important for how do we have a better society, how do we have a better ecosystem, how do we have a better platform to build upon, and how do we make ourselves as a society and as individuals better. And so it was like, okay. And then, of course, Hamilton, the original idea, Federal Reserve, and inventor of the U.S., the first part of the centralized U.S. banking system. And then, of course, the Satoshi Nakamoto as the unknown, kind of like, inventor of crypto. And then to have that, kind of stylized debate. And I thought it was great fun. And actually, when I showed it to the banking folks, they all went, huh, that's interesting. as opposed to, oh, we don't take those people seriously. They went, oh, wait a minute, right? Like,
well, it's
oh,
such a great way. It's
Yeah.
such a great way to get people to start thinking differently. And so much of it is that, we try to educate, we try to like bring information out. And when you sort of do it dry, it makes it so much harder. But
Yes.
when you do it in that video, to me, I received it in one of the emails that gets sent out for those that follow you. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It's a perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of the Burger King. I don't know if you remember when Burger King did the net neutrality, when they did it with when they talked about net neutrality, and it was one of the ways to like bring net neutrality to the forefront in a simple way that everybody could get. And that's what I loved about it. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And by the way, if you or other folks have ideas for what, like there should be a second version of it, because obviously part of the reason why we're here, you're doing the work you're doing, this community's here, is because, obviously these open networks as platforms for creating generativity for better patterns in society is the mission. And to get those ideas out there, to understand it's not just about like, oh, look, your cryptocurrency started at $X and got to $Y, and some people made some money out of that. That could be an important part of the system, but it's actually, in fact, these platforms that we're building on that's really important. So if there's more ideas, always welcome.
Yeah, I would love. We'll think about that and we'll bring some over to you.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said is so important. And so if you think about the idea of that this is more than just what the token is worth or the value. In fact, that's not even something that we focus on at all. We focus on what opportunities that we can deliver into the ecosystem, into the different regions of the world that with different needs to get connected to the banking infrastructure. But what opportunities do you see with respect to blockchain and digital currency?
So when crypto, this is the reason I wasn't quite in the first set of when it was first pitched to me, it was kind of like, look, it was kind of like digital gold, something. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And by the way, it goes all the way back to my PayPal heritage, because there was e-gold and cyber gold and all this other stuff around the time, which wasn't really that decentralized. And is here's a certificate that's like a bearer bond for that bar of gold. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's, I wouldn't say that that's the step forward in the decentralized system, but there was a bunch of those things, but always interesting. And I just kind of like, okay. And then it was like, okay, actually, in fact, it's network as a platform. And in fact, it's network as a platform with kind of a network-driven open source, kind of standard to it that had this kind of, not just obviously the consensus protocols about how the ledger is decided, but consensus protocols about how the evolution of the system is done. And, the protocols are a little squishy and fuzzy in various ways, but still that is as a direction. And I went, okay, this could be super interesting, because the precise thing that made the internet obviously so generative in communications and information and a bunch of the, commerce, a bunch of those things was having this decentralized kind of protocol. Can we begin to apply that to the instruments of value and value transfer? And obviously one of the things that Stellar has a high focus on is, well, this also means that we can do things like in Africa, and we can do things in other areas, emerging markets, areas of the world, because the Western banking system is super expensive, not the least because obviously like any commercial organization, banks are like, how do I make a lot more money, right? So they're not like, how do I provide banking services to someone whose net worth is, the equivalent of a quarter or 25 cents, but it's like, how do I make a lot more money? And it's like, actually, in fact, getting everybody within the modern software and electronic system allows them to participate in commerce, allows them to participate in the kind of the evolution of the financial system. And so the kinds of applications, people typically in these things talk about smart contracts. I tend to think a lot about, like I'm on the board of Kiva as well. How do you get kind of the entire kind of software digital data ecosystem functioning as a platform across the entire world so that everyone can participate, right? Those kinds of applications. Obviously, smart contracts are interesting, but that kind of thing. And then how do you unlock the kinds of things that developers, when you're just given an API, which is not obviously how the banks do when they're forward foot. They may be dragged into it, but that's not the thing that they naturally lead on their own. It requires revolutions like cryptocurrency And actually, in fact, sorry, I'm talking a little bit long, and I'll let you get to the next question. But one of the things that I did pretty early is Davos is one of the conferences I go to, and I said, okay, look, I'll give a talk about Bitcoin, and that talk then turned into a Wired UK article because I was saying, look, you guys really think about this as a currency, which is interesting. And then, of course, all the debate is like, oh, is this the one currency to rule them all? Like, no, lots of currencies. It can be just another currency. You don't need to panic that much about it. But the really interesting thing is platform, right? The really interesting thing is what now that there are ability for people to write apps, what comes about? Because some of the things that, like you don't necessarily think about these kinds of amazing platforms. Like when the internet started, people weren't thinking Uber and this kind of mobile network that would reconceptualize transport and how transport works on all kinds of levels, or Airbnb and how travel rental and experiences work like. And that's the kind of thing that you want to enable developers to do.
And I think it's when you mentioned PayPal and of course your relationship with PayPal from the very, very early days in terms of how of founding it. One of the things that that just happened recently was that PayPal agreed to accept, or is now accepting, cryptocurrencies as part of payment mechanisms, and that is a step forward. And steps like that bring this into the mainstream in these geographies, but it doesn't actually move a whole lot forward in the focal points that we're looking at, which is in the trying to bring those who are unbanked to the banking system. Yes. And so if you think about, like, that's what we're here all week to talk about at Meridian, is really like this network and how you can build this network and solve those problems. Mm. What do you think the role of network plays in helping to solve these problems? I mean, you just talked about others building on it and creating different things, but changing, is it going to change society for the better?
Well, it certainly can. And I think by default, creation of networks that bring out the better aspects of how people work in interaction with each other, then actually have an amplifying positive effect. Now, networks can go both directions in some ways, right? There's terrorist networks too, and there's so networks are not like if it network equal good. Now, more networks, because they tend to, as they get large, tend to be visible to a large chunk of humanity. Humanity tends to want it to be something that's beneficial to them, whether it's commercial networks, economic networks, information networks. We're obviously working on problems with information networks in the last few years, right? I mean, it took a lot of misinformation from the president to start going, okay, well, let's start framing these social media things as you should get the facts on this because this is a lie, right? This is not information. And how do we get to those new information, truth, discovery of truth within these things? And so, I think networks can evolve to being super positive because, like, for example, just take information. Like we go through these waves with the internet. You kind of go, okay, well, it starts with, oh, there's a whole bunch of people whose voices aren't heard that now can be heard. And things like, for example, when you have a war like the Iraq War, we're actually hearing from people on the ground, the civilians and so forth, and we're getting an understanding of what's going on. This is enormously positive. There's an enormous step forward in terms of understanding other people, compassion, kind of governing human behavior in various ways. Now, of course, we get to another stage where it's being hacked by, autocratic, malicious intent governments, and it's being and by political actors, and so it's like, okay, so now we need to adjust to that too. But overall, I think networks can lead to that. And so when you get to the unbanked, you go, all right, so one, we can have a provisioning that's much cheaper, which means we include a lot more people and bring them in and then get them started on the system of it. And obviously, once you begin to bring in like, for example, in a lot of the areas of the world, like kind of poor farmers into a bank system, they can save, they can get intelligence for, what's, kind of like what's going on in markets. Like, oh, I should take my goods here versus here. I can potentially get loans. So to say, hey, like one of the nonprofits I support is a nonprofit called Give Directly. And part of what they use technology to decide who to just give money to, because people do know, like, oh, if I got $100, this is how it can improve my life circumstances. Not like I can go out and party. And like, for example, the canonical case within Give Directly is they figured out there was like people were spending $100 a year to replace their thatch roof. And if they gave them $300, what they did is they went and got an aluminum roof, which then raised their income by $100 a year. And then they could start investing that in the things that they're doing economically and so forth. Well, that's partially like participation in the bank system. You have a good, kind of electronic network in a banking system, then all of a sudden identifying people and giving, doing things like this kind of Give Directly philanthropy, which goes directly to how do you improve your household income, now become all the more possible. So that's what I mean by there's like this range of applications, not just the simple, kind of like, oh, well, I now have an easier ability to have cash, to pay with cash, the speed of money, all of which matter, but a variety of other things as well.
I think it's so important to think about the financial infrastructure in not the way that we think about it today. We need to think about it in exactly what you just said about what the needs are and how to solve those needs, which could look different from a banking standpoint than we're used to. So when you built PayPal and LinkedIn, were you always aware of the challenges of needing that counterparty? I mean, that's part of it for us, right? Is to really create a network. You need to have players on both sides to be able to make that move. So were you aware of that at the outset? Is that something you learned about going through it?
Well, at PayPal, when we started it, we were pretty naive and young. We didn't even know what a chargeback was. I've sometimes characterized the PayPal journey as we were moving so fast that the landmines we'd run over would explode behind us versus underneath us, because it was like a full forward motion as a way of doing it. So no, we weren't that familiar with it. Now, we knew that it had a network active. That was part of like one of the really central ideas in PayPal. It almost kind of, to some degree, started the whole kind of modern airdrop notion. Yeah. That kind of led to all this, because it was like, oh, it's this, hey, if I bring you on the system, you get $10, I get $10. And that was a way of solving the counterparty thing, because it was like, oh, we'd both have $10 and we'd be here. Now, we had made a decision to do dollars rather than, because those who are old enough to remember this, there are all these services doing beans and flues and other kinds of things, alternative point systems. And we said, look, actually, in fact, you have to be a maximum liquidity and tradability in order to make this work. And that's part of the reason why there's currency exchanges and the major currencies that people trust and believe in. So we'll do that. But we'll do that in this way of trying to bring everybody into the network. And what, of course, that morphed to, which then has also grown in many ways to what PayPal is today, was to say, well, actually, every individual can then become a merchant, can then come transact in the system and get the benefit of doing that, which back at 2001 was I could start doing goods and services through the internet, where previously I'd have to have a relationship with a merchant bank and do all the things that made that happen, which was beyond the vast majority of people and vast majority of individuals, even beyond some small businesses, would now become doable. And that was the way that kind of accelerated commerce. Now, ultimately, we had this idea of kind of the dollar bonus giveaway, which is like airdrop. But the thing that actually, of course, really accelerated PayPal was going into eBay, because eBay had all of these small merchants, including individuals doing it, who couldn't get to the merchant accounts, were accepting checks at the time, if anyone remembers what those are, right? And we're like, oh, here's the electronic banking system, like a microcosm of what now, kind of Stellar and various DeFi and other kinds of things are trying to accelerate into the unbanked world, is to say, well, that's precisely the kind of thing we're trying to get to.
But then you did it again at LinkedIn. And I mean, in a different way, right? With a different counterparty on the other side, because you always need for the network to be able to grow. So what was it that caused you to think, oh, we can actually replicate this in more of a social setting or a business setting?
So the thing that was interesting, so when I started LinkedIn, one of the things I recommend to all entrepreneurs is go around and ask everyone that anyone who's smart, to give you critical feedback. Like, why won't this work? right? Because you go say, what do you think about my idea? They think you want reassurance, and you say, oh yeah, your idea is great, and that doesn't help you at all. What really helps you is to hear why they think your idea won't work. And so I went on with LinkedIn, following my own advice, and said to everybody, and they said, oh, this is never going to work. And I said, why isn't it never going to work? Well, it's a network, and the first person in, nobody there, no value proposition. Reed invites Danelle in. Reed and Danelle already know each other, no value proposition for each of them. So there's no incentive for inviting. There's no incentive. The network has to get to this very big state before you begins really getting valuable network properties. It's not going to work. And so I looked at this and I said, okay, what do I know that they don't know? Because this is part of what you do when you're thinking as an entrepreneur. And I said, well, the thing that I know that the criticisms don't know is twofold. One is there will be some people who will invite people because they can envision the future. This is a small percentage. And there's other people who invite people because they're just curious. It's just the game. Like you kind of set it up as easy to go invite people and kind of check out this new stomping ground. And between those two impulses, with enough tools and kind of like game mechanics to incent it and so forth, we can get to enough density that the value propositions will kick in. And that was my essential first hypothesis. So yes, until you have those counterparties, until you have the network built out. I mean, 2 months into the growth of LinkedIn, like we were looking at the search log queries because we're trying to say, okay, well, what are people looking for when they've come to a network? We even saw the very first like looking for meat packing experts in China, right? Because I'm trying to solve this problem. It's a network problem, and I don't know how to solve this problem, and certainly doesn't work on Google, right? Maybe it'll work here, and it wouldn't. 2 months in, didn't work on LinkedIn. Probably works today, right? To track down to a because in business, in expertise, in a knowledge, other humans are your best counterparties. Well, how do you search the human network that has all of the tags and all the other information for that? That's what LinkedIn is continuing to grow to today. Obviously, most people tend to think, well, job searching and talent searching, which are, of course, mainstream applications. But actually, I'll say one more thing, because this is the surprise in networks. I was talking to an exec who was considering joining, who said to me, oh, I have a great idea for you. People are in companies and they have no idea like what other people in the companies, like their hobbies are and they're doing. And so you should add that as a feature. And I'm like, well, actually, it's already there. So you go and type in like company LinkedIn fly fishing. You will find a set of people in LinkedIn who have put fly fishing into their profile, right? So it is obviously there's a bunch of people who like fly fishing who haven't put it in yet because they haven't really conceptualized being found that way. But that's how these networks grow in interesting ways. Then, of course, once you have enough density of information or transaction or communication flow, then you can start building the additional features on top of it.
I think that, the LinkedIn story, as well as the PayPal story, we have to think about it from our standpoint in terms of what we're doing here at Stellar. And we're laying this foundational network of anchors, which are these financial institutions that are out there. And it feels like that's the right place to start, right? Because you get them and they get connected and then people can build on top of it. But how do you know when you're looking at a business, how do you know what the right place to start is? And if that's the business that you should be in?
Well, early stage stuff, most of the venture stuff, Stellar, things I invest in and so forth, Airbnb, you don't know. You have an investment hypothesis. And so what I recommend people do is they write down, like, here is what we're presuming we can do, or the direction the world's moving in, or the direction the world is. And almost like a logical proof, although not logical proof, like that kind of concludes to our success in our venture and what we're doing. And then you look at that and then you try to measure the parts of that hypothesis as best you can. And obviously it's really nice when you have data like, oh, look, a network's doing this or something else as a way of doing it. Makes it much easier. But frequently, the way you're measuring it is you're going, well, what will the psychological, what will the psychology of the human participants in these nodes, whether or not they're individuals or they are their organizations, and will that participation, will that mutual investment create a cycle by which the network is growing? And I'll give you an example from Airbnb. When I brought in Airbnb, which was my first kind of Greylock investment, my partner David Z, who was my most valuable board member at LinkedIn, is part of the reason I ended up at Greylock, said, okay, every venture capitalist has have a deal they're going to fail on. Airbnb can be yours. And so it was like, okay, well, David's super smart. What am I saying? And I, think through it and so on. And then, David's credit, 6 months later, nothing really changed because Airbnb is one of these classic stories that look like this and then like that. Came to me and said, okay, well, you were right, I was wrong. What did you see that I didn't see? And I said, look, you were absolutely right. Could be a disaster, like a really bad thing happens in an Airbnb rental and it quells it. Local governments fear the future frequently, and with political, leverage from the hotels and everything else, it quells it. All of the risks that you talked about, could happen. But if it didn't, right, and we're measuring them, it could be huge, and it totally transforms it. And then this is where you get to the psychology of individuals. Because hosts go, well, I have this asset, my spare room, my apartment, the tree house out back, that every day it's not rented, I lose money, right? It depreciates, I lose it. So I'm motivated to try to make it valuable to want someone to stay in. And then for the travelers, it's like, look, I can go to a hotel. There's certain features that benefits the hotel, but boy, that really nice tree house that's in the back of that yard, in Santa Clara, that might be kind of fun. That might be different than, going to, whatever Best Western or whatever hotel. And that could be really interesting. And plus, I'm meeting that interesting family that could show me the local coffee place. If that plays out, that transforms the world. And that's the kind of thing that you're looking at when you don't have the data for the motivation of the human parties who are all investing in these networks together.
I love the idea of investing in the human motivation and the human instinct. They're telling me that our session is over, but I just have one more question for you. So I'm going to push this a little bit. You have been involved in the election here in the United States, and I get asked this question all week. What does a Biden administration do for blockchain and crypto? Anything?
So I don't think they know yet. And I'm certainly not a representative of the administration on this in any way. But what I do know is, particularly unlike the previous administration, they have a theory of governance, and they do think that technology helps society. And so they want to figure out ways in which technology should be amplified and channeled in ways that are helpful. And so the way that they'll approach crypto, and like, for example, they'll love things like unbanked and crossing the digital divide as part of this. They'll be looking for like how can technology be helpful to the large numbers of humanity? Because, by the way, usually the people who are on the bottom of the pyramid tend to be the more numerous, the disadvantaged, the poor, etc. And so how can we in particular help them? And technology should be helping with that. And so I think those feet forward with crypto will probably get a much more receptive ear, because they're like, okay, how do we help? And how do we have technology help is, I think, the way that they're starting versus the reality television show that we've unfortunately been in the last 4 years.
Well, you just answered that question far better than I did all week. So thank you so much. Reed, it is so good to see you. So good to talk to you. Thank you for your time and for sharing your space with us. I appreciate it. I'm going to hand it back over to Justin. Go ahead.
Good night with you always. Great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm no Justin, but I will be here to hand you off to the next session. So thank you so much, Danelle and Reed, for that really powerful conversation on building networks. Obviously, something that is critically important to what we're all doing here at Stellar. So really appreciate you all sharing those insights. So now we're going to jump into our breakout sessions. So on the technical track, Justin will hand you off to a really exciting session where we'll be discussing the performance and regulatory challenges of blockchain with David Mazieres, as well as Oleg Andreev and Lindsay Lin from the SDF. And then here we're going to jump into our first business track talk. So we are about to hear from some business leaders in this space really pushing us to take blockchain into the mainstream. Jeremy Allaire of Circle and Meltem Demir of CoinShares will be joining us. And leading that conversation is none other than the superstar journalist and one of my favorite podcasts, Lara Shin. Lara, thank you so much for being here with us, and I will hand it off to you.
Great, thanks for having me. So thank you to everyone for joining our discussion, Crypto on Every Corner, Driving Adoption, featuring Jeremy Allaire, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Circle, and Meltem Demirs, Chief Strategy Officer at CoinShares. Welcome, Meltem. Is Meltem here?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I don't know why I can't see you in the screen, but I guess it's the particularities of Zoom. All right, so the topic of today's discussion is how the crypto industry can drive adoption. I just wanted to find out from you guys, how do you define that? What do you think the world will look like once crypto has been adopted?
Go ahead, Mel.
I think, there's two sort of visions, and I think, I don't know, maybe we can just be honest with ourselves. Sometimes I worry about the vision we have for cryptocurrency. So where I started, and I have a lot of respect for Jeremy and the team at Circle, because back when I was in grad school in Boston, I actually used Circle to buy a lot of Bitcoin back in the day. So kudos to you, Jeremy. You saved me from my days of buying Bitcoin on Craigslist and using Gox and spending money to Japan. So
Glad I could be helpful.
Yeah, so you helped me stack my sats in the early days of Bitcoin. But look, I think there's sort of two visions, and they're two very different visions. The vision I've always had for Bitcoin that I think is a really compelling one is the separation for the first time of money and state. Money has been an object of the state since Julius Caesar stamped his face on a gold coin. And I think really the experiment we're attempting here, like the world is no longer defined by physical borders. We live in a very digital world. Anyone can be anyone on the internet. We have many different identities, many different communities we're part of, sometimes as our default reality selves, sometimes we're pseudonymous. There are a lot of eggs on Twitter who are anonymous individuals. So I think we live in this really interesting world that is truly becoming borderless. And to me, Bitcoin really represents the evolution of money and transfer value in that world. But then at the same time, I think governments are looking at Bitcoin. I mean, right now we're living in a world where governments are trying to ban math. They're literally trying to ban encryption. We've done this time and time again for the last 25 years since encryptions existed. But the advent of central bank digital currencies, and certainly what we've seen in the Asia Pacific region in particular with the advent of DCP and sort of national quote unquote digital currencies, I do have a lot of concerns around the ability for people to have financial privacy in transactions, privacy in their communications. So we have these two very different paths down which we're heading. I don't know if they're gonna coexist. I don't know if it's going to be an epic collision. And I know, Jeremy, you've also, been working a lot on USDC, which arguably has a big role to play here. But I think the future of cryptocurrencies in our society is sort of at this very interesting impasse. I want Bitcoin to exist. I believe people have the right to privacy, that people have the right to pseudonymity in their transactions. But I think governments certainly do not like that and are advocating now for the antithesis of that, which is central bank digital currencies and monetary systems that give them complete control and the ability to exert financial censorship at every level of society. So Jeremy, I'll pass it to you.
No, totally. I mean, there's so much there. I guess it just as a technologist, to the question of when will this be, whatever, mainstream or however you want to call that. My view is that, things are mainstream in terms of technology when they disappear, when they're invisible to people. And when essentially people just take them for granted, right? And so depending on your age and depending on where you are, you might take for granted social media, but obviously that wasn't something that existed, whatever X number of years ago, or you might take for granted that, you have this amazing, supercomputer, and that's just that is reality. That is what the world was, but obviously that had changed. So at what point is the use of crypto so ubiquitous and so embedded in so many things that we just take it for granted? So we have quite a ways to go on that. But I think we're making really, really strong progress. I think when I also think about that question, I really think about, crypto and blockchain it's a pretty broad surface area, right? You can be narrowly focused and sort of say there's, non-sovereign stores of value that use a blockchain infrastructure, Bitcoin, Zcash, et cetera, which I completely agree with Meltem, right? There's this is this new form of borderless internet money, and it will continue to grow and scale. And I'm quite optimistic about that. But then there's the fundamentals of the broader technology, right? So, public chain infrastructure as effectively a new operating system layer on the internet, a new set of operating systems for storing data, conducting transactions, and executing code. That's what operating systems can help do. And so these new operating system layers, are very, very general purpose in many respects. They're well suited to what I call fiduciary trust applications, but can also be, I was in a hackathon panel with Meltem the other day, and we were looking at someone who built, a decentralized messaging application on top of Solana. The point being,
and decentralized fantasy football.
Decentralized fantasy football, right? So digital games, messaging applications, all of these things on decentralized infrastructure, Web3, et cetera. Like that part of this is also a very, very important part of this. And so, and something like stable coins, like regulated stable coins, like USDC or potentially Libra, like these are also like apps that run on these new operating systems and could be quite popular. And so I think in terms of the question of when does that become mainstream, I think we're really close there. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, many of the most popular digital wallet products in the world that are used, that we think of and use like as peer-to-peer payment apps, other things like that, they're going to turn on these protocols. They're going to turn these on, and you're going to have, all of a sudden hundreds of millions of people that can make interoperable payments with each other. And that will kind of be in the background. That will kind of be invisible. You won't be trapped in making payments to people who have Venmo. You'll be able to make payments between Venmo and Square Cash and PayPal and Swish in Sweden and Vips in Norway, and go around the world to all these different apps. They're all going to speak these common protocols, and I think that will be a mainstream phase in digital currency that's coming. And I think ultimately, that same number of people who might feel, okay, like I'm using euros or dollars or whatnot, feeling comfortable using Bitcoin, that will grow too. And eventually, I would expect billions of people will want to use Bitcoin too.
Yeah, the way that I think about it also is, 10 or 15 years ago, I didn't wake up and check multiple communications apps, like iMessage and WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram and Facebook Messenger and Twitter DMs. But this nowadays, it's like, probably one of the first things I do when I wake up. So I imagine that it'll be the same here, but for like a huge variety of financial transactions. And, like Jeremy said, across the globe, not just with people that I know. And I also think that there will probably be a lot of ways to make passive income off these networks. And it will be, not with like a huge company at the center of it, but just kind of like little mini democracies around the world. So let's now kind of talk about where we are in this cycle, because even though we're far off from this vision that we created, I do think that this has been a landmark year in some ways, probably with the biggest news being PayPal introducing the sale and purchase of Bitcoin and 3 other cryptocurrencies on its platform. So how would you describe kind of like where we are in our current stage?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. Look, I think at this point, I'm shocked that it took PayPal this long, to be candid. There are a lot of stories unfolding here. And if we sort of pull at the threads here, I was listening to Reid Hoffman in the last session, chatting with Danelle from the Stellar Foundation about, his journey at PayPal. And he used the word, we were so naive when we started PayPal, which I thought was interesting. When we look at traditional fintechs, I think many of them have recognized the power of adding crypto to their platform. Number one, it's a huge revenue driver. Square's Bitcoin revenue has grown quarter over quarter by really, really large percentages. I think this last quarter, their Bitcoin revenue grew close to 200%. And not only that, I think executives are seeing the impact to both private company valuations and public company valuations of adding crypto. Similarly, if we look at the PayPal story, PayPal, has 300 million users. They only, though, transmit, I think, about $700 billion of value a year. If we look at what's happening in APAC, Alipay last year transmitted $17 trillion of value on their network. So I think there are these radical differences in how people around the world are using payment systems. And there is a competition afoot, right? Like at the end of the day, what we're competing for is what we were competing for with the internet. I remember my first interactions on the internet were with, chat apps, but then AOL came along and sort of made the internet accessible for people like my parents who weren't, playing video games and playing around on these chat groups with weirdos all around the world. And I kind of view money the same way, right? We have people who are building these closed networks, but all of these payment apps have the same fundamental challenge. And I think Jeremy articulated it really well. If I have PayPal and he has Venmo, we can't interact with one another, even though we have the same phone, even though we live in the same country, we're standing right next to each other, but we can't transmit value. How insane is that? So in my view at this point, large companies adopting crypto, it's a must have. I'm shocked it's taking them this long. And it is driving valuations, it's driving revenue, it's a no-brainer. And let's not forget, when you add crypto, you also get access to one of the most powerful marketing channels in the world, which is crypto Twitter. Like we have an army of people on the internet who are obsessed with crypto. And anytime anyone does something like Paul Tudor Jones talks about Bitcoin, if you look at his Google search results, like flatline, the minute he talks about Bitcoin, huge spike. So in terms of relevance, I think a lot of companies have recognized if you market to Bitcoiners, like it's a great way to get eyeballs on what you're doing. So let's not underestimate the power of crypto Twitter. Shout out to everyone because it's an amazing community to market to.
Yeah, I mean, just checking in on like where we're at. I mean, I think, this year was a really big year. I think that having, mainstream consumer fintechs, we've had, Revolut and Robinhood and Square and others. Like I think, as Meltem said, it was only a matter of time that PayPal would introduce some support. And obviously, there's been this tremendous rise in many different dimensions here, right? There's been obviously the rise in the absolute price of Bitcoin. There's been this incredible surge in growth in stablecoin usage, like USDC. We've seen $200 billion of on-chain transactions. It's just incredible to see that amount of growth. And, obviously you're seeing credit markets that exist now that are smart contract based, these yield markets, which is phenomenon that's grown, enormously this year. All of these things are thematically, these were twinkles in someone's eye a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, and now they're actually playing out. So I think the twinkle in the eye that we just talked about of like interoperable digital wallets and people using cryptocurrency within that, whether it's stable coins or Bitcoin or both, which I think it'll oftentimes be both. That may be much faster than we expect. And I think we're seeing digital wallet projects in every corner of the world, in every currency market in the world, who are embracing this. And so, that is going to, like the early internet, it's going to light up this global network, and all of a sudden, everyone will be connected, and that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I do agree. It sort of feels like right now is sort of this tee up moment where like a lot of people are just kind of getting access to what would be necessary for a kind of next big step. And yet I also think that there are some other things that need to be resolved before the ball can really move forward. And I think, maybe one of those things might be regulatory questions that need to be resolved, or like certain kinds of other infrastructure that need to be built. So what do you think are kind of the next critical steps for where the crypto industry needs to go, I guess in the next year or so?
I've been thinking a lot about this. I can touch on a couple and go from there. But, on the infrastructure side, I mean, clearly, and this is really just from a little bit of a narrow perspective here, which is sort of stablecoin view. In order for this to work at scale for consumer scale payments, we need to be using blockchain infrastructure that is designed for that. And so, one of the really key things, I am not what I call a blockchain maximalist. Like, I don't have a blockchain that I say, well, that's definitely gonna be the dominant blockchain. There's a huge amount of innovation in this space. You're seeing, obviously projects like Stellar really starting to get traction with a lot of different financial applications. You see DeFi happening on things like Ethereum, but it's hitting constraints. You're seeing other new chains that launch that are focused on things like, decentralized markets or regulated securities or other kinds of things. So, but all of this needs this infrastructure. We need scale. We need to be able to have applications. Like if we have these consumer wallet applications that are pointing at a public internet network and pointing their users at a public internet network, and you're settling transactions, you need to be able to support, thousands and then tens of thousands of transactions per second. And we're seeing that. We're seeing blockchains that can do that. And so that's really, really exciting. That's been a missing piece, is that combination there. There's a lot on the regulatory side, but even there, and maybe we'll come back to that in more detail. You can, for some people, the regulatory work, you can call it progress, meaning that there is actually increasing amounts of clarity or rulemaking that's happening in different parts of the world, and other people that's not progress, that's actually restrictive and will I think, potentially destroy some of the potential benefits of this technology. And but I think for everyday users and businesses to say, yes, this is a legitimate financial infrastructure for the modern economy, for this digital economy, there will have to be, these rule sets and they're going to need to be consistently applied in a lot of places. And so that's a key piece that's unfolding literally as we speak.
Meltem, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Look, let's just be very realistic. I run a regulated business. Jeremy's in a regulated business, right? We've certainly had a lot of interactions with regulators. At this stage, I like to joke it would have been easier to start a bank than to start a crypto company, because it would have been less onerous.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? I'm like, why are we doing this? But look, let me maybe take a slightly contrarian view, because I think it's fun when we get to disagree on things. While certainly, I think right now we're going through this phase, and we've been talking about it forever. The institutions are coming. What does it look like for crypto? Which really, let's for a minute talk about how unique cryptocurrencies are. We built an entirely separate market with its own infrastructure, with its own unique sort of marketplaces, its own unique financial instruments, entirely outside of the existing financial system. For the last 12 years, that is what we've been doing. That's what I've been investing in. That's what Jeremy was building, initially at Circle. And he was trying to create that first bridge between the traditional US banking system, ACH, and, being able to use the correspondent banking system to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. That really has only started in earnest now. But the question is, does adopting cryptocurrencies mean that institutions continue to exist in their current form? And I am certainly personally of the mind that institutions should not continue to operate in their current form. I don't think it would be a step forward for society if we took cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and shoved them in a vault at BNY Mellon or JP Morgan Chase or another institution and gave people synthetic Bitcoin to trade. That is not the point of what we're doing here. Yes, maybe we get slightly faster transactions, but you don't need a blockchain or a digital currency to do that. I think the true value and the true potential of cryptocurrencies and their ability, to Jeremy's point, to create these open protocols, these open source networks where anyone can build, anyone can interact on them. Yes, a business that you build in a particular jurisdiction will obviously be subject to the rules and regulations of that particular jurisdiction. But the whole point of the internet is it's open and it's borderless and permissionless, and anyone can interact with the internet. Obviously, if I'm accessing the internet in China versus accessing the internet in the US, my experience is going to be different due to the service provider in that jurisdiction, but we're still utilizing the same protocols. We're still utilizing a lot of the same infrastructure, and we're accessing a lot of similar platforms. I think the challenge I have is I really want to see cryptocurrencies change the way that institutions function. I think we are long overdue for change in our relationship with money. I am of the mindset that, the separation of money and state is one of the most important experiments that we have ever conducted as humanity. It's profoundly interesting from a philosophical perspective, from a political perspective, a cultural perspective. I always like to say, like, Bitcoin is a social movement first and foremost. I'll sound like the crazy radical here. I'm not ashamed to say that. Like, welcome to our cult. We have great swag and great memes. But look, I think the core question for me is how can we use cryptocurrencies to evolve how our institutions function, right? Because at the end of the day, humans don't define themselves by the jurisdiction in which they're physically located anymore. And we're in this really weird world. And I do sympathize with regulators because they're grappling with a number of challenges on a number of fronts that come from like the shift from a physical world to a very digital world. And the digital world doesn't have jurisdiction, not in the traditional sense. So how are you going to regulate something that has no CEO, that has no headquarters, that has no physical jurisdiction? You can't. You have to change your mental framework for how you think about these things. And I think that is what's really taking time. It's going to take a shift in who's in power. And we're seeing that, right? A lot of younger people are in Congress. There are a lot of people from communities who haven't historically been in Congress. We have the most women in power in the US than we've had in our entire country's history, right? Like, that is also crazy. It's the year 2020, and just now do we have an elected official in the White House who is a woman? It's bizarre to me. But there's a lot of change happening, and there's a changing out of the old guard, as I call it. And there are people with different mindsets who are coming in who are looking at the world and saying, well, why are we doing things this way? And that's why I love working in technology and venture capital, is I get to interact with people like Jeremy every day who say, wait a minute, we don't have to do things this way. We can actually change what it means to be a financial institution. That's what's so exciting to me, is like, we get to create a new narrative and we get to rewrite the story of what it means to be a financial institution. And that, I think, is actually going to be the most powerful thing that we can build, that we can do. I am so excited about it. I think it's amazing. Hopefully it's coming through the screen. I am so excited about it.
I would like ladder off that quickly, which is just to say, like the changes that become possible when money works the way the internet works, and it goes so much deeper than that. I mean, I think to Meltem's point, like, we are seeing experiments right now with the creation of new, what I call kind of corporate forms, basically new structures that are entirely governed in crypto, where the entirety of the way in which participants are involved, the way in which governance happens, the way in which value is exchanged, the way in which value is created and derived, that's all being managed on blockchains, no connection to a externalized legal system, or no connection to the traditional financial system. And, in economics, and I studied economics as well, and you've got microeconomics and you've got macroeconomics. And in microeconomics, you're focused on the theory of the firm and what is a firm happens in a firm. And we have joint stock corporations as the modern, model. I believe we are right now seeing a revolution away from joint stock corporations and into digitally native entities that are entirely exist in tokenized form and entirely exist on blockchains. And, if you're starting a project and you want to collaborate with people and exchange value and ultimately create work output and so on, it's going to move to those kinds of forms. And that just goes so far outside of the global legal system is even capable of contemplating. But that's what people are doing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, Jeremy, let's do it. Let's get rid of it.
Yes, and I'm excited to cover you guys creating this brand new thing, which is amazing. So we literally have just 1 minute left.
Oh,
So I'm
no.
going to ask one quick question. You only get to say one sentence with your answer, and then I'm going to just do these some of the Q&As that are also short answers. But what are some of your favorite success stories when it comes to adoption? So maybe just pick one company with like one reason why that's one of your favorite success stories so far with adoption. And while you're thinking about that, one of the Q&As that came in was, when is USD coming to Stellar? Someone wants to know when they can trade it on a DEX.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I can answer that audience question. So yeah, we announced USDC for Stellar, and it's coming soon.
Okay, you don't have a date. Okay,
coming.
favorite success stories, and then we're going to close out.
Go ahead,
What are your favorite success stories when it comes to adoption so far? And just give a one sentence reason.
Yeah, favorite success story, Bitcoin as savings technology. I'm from Turkey. People in countries like Turkey are able to use Bitcoin to protect themselves from the debasement of their own currencies and preserve their wealth and their financial sovereignty. I think that's so empowering. And to me, that's why I love cryptocurrencies. Like, let's empower individuals, not institutions.
I like really, really small world anecdotes, which is I heard a story of a firsthand story of a person who was fleeing Colombia because of specific human rights violations, and they knew that they were going to have to cross a border to get out, and they were going to be confronted with police, and everything would be taken from them. And they created a brain wallet, and they walked across the border with their Bitcoin in their brain, and all their wealth was preserved. And I thought, that's changing the world.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would forget the brain wallet, but that's just me. But anyway. Okay, you guys. Well, this has been so great. I'm so glad I got to see you again. And thank you so much for participating in our panel.
My pleasure. Take
See
care.
you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lara, Jeremy, and Melton. That was a really interesting discussion. We've got some, excuse me. So we'd love to hear your feedback on that as well. Please feel free to share that in the right-hand screen in the feedback bar. And as well, we're going to head to our break now. We have a quiz, and then we have a special surprise visit from one of our ecosystem partners. So don't go too far. We'll be back. All right, welcome back, Meridian. So we've got a special guest for you, but first, I'm going to give you our next quiz question. The question is, what is the average closing time on the Stellar Ledger? We know it's fast, but exactly how fast is it? So give your answer, and the first two correct answers will win. So now we've got a special treat for you. I would like to introduce Pablo Orlando, president of Sedan Network, who's here to give us some special updates. Pablo, how are you?
Hey, Lisa, how are you? Thanks very much for inviting us.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you here. So quickly, I think it would be great if you can just give us a quick introduction to Sedan Network for those who haven't learned about your business so far.
Sure. So Sedan Network, we are a digital asset platform that mainly we operate in Latin America, in countries like Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Chile. And we enable payments and provide liquidity. Obviously, we do all these on top of a blockchain through Stellar. We're growing a lot and fast, and so we're happy for that. Also about our vision, and we keep building different products that give or grant financial freedom to the people. And one of the examples why we're so excited, it is that we have built through Stellar, the first Argentinian stable coin named USD, as well as the Brazilian BRLT. So we're very excited about that too, with the anchors, and we're starting to see some real use cases for people and companies using them. So we're happy for that.
Yes, we are big fans of ARST and BRLT and the Sedan Network on Stellar. So, Pablo, I know we've talked about this before, but I'd love to hear kind of what your vision is for ARST and BRLT. How would you see, an individual in Argentina or Brazil using those stablecoins?
Yeah, totally. So there are tons of examples and real case uses. So, for example, the most common one, it is, there's a lot of inflation in Latin America and on a lot of our countries. People try to protect themselves from the currency, local currency that keeps devaluating. Sometimes it's about 30 to 50% in the same year. So one of those cases would be, which is happening on a daily and monthly basis, it is, people trying to, digitalize their local currency, the local peso, for the digital currency, and afterwards exchange it for, the US dollar, like USDX, USDC soon. So that's one of the most common cases. But then there's another one which is very common, which is cross-border payments. Latin America, there's a lot of people who have either they travel to the US or to Europe to work, and then afterwards they either want to send money to their families back home, or they need to pay utilities while they're abroad. So that would be a really good scenario. And the last, which we are finding the most, it is also a lot of companies, holding companies, in the US, in Europe, but they have their subsidiaries down in Latin America, especially in Argentina, and they have to either send payments or collect, the dividends. And for these, they are finding that blockchain is one of the best, easiest, and fastest way to do it, especially through the stable coins.
Awesome. I love that. I love those visions. And yeah, I absolutely agree with you that being able to digitize your local currency just gives you so much more power with what you can do with that money. So great to hear about what you guys are doing. And then I know that you also have kind of a special announcement for us today. So, anything you want to tell us about, Pablo?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for bringing this up. So today we're launching StableX. StableX will be the first fiat gateway, kind of like a first global stablecoin exchange, so that anybody in the world, not just people from Latin America, can show up, bring their local currencies and exchange them for any of the current stablecoins that are done through Stellar. So we have launched today with the ARST, BRLT. Anybody can go, especially Argentinians and Brazilians can go and exchange their local currency and send them to, for example, the Vibrant wallet. And soon, very soon, so we want to invite all the anchors and stable coins that we're going to be listing them in the next few weeks. So we want to invite anybody in the ecosystem that wants to be listed, who has a stable coin that wants to be listed at stablex.org. We're happy to start conversations as we keep on launching the other features.
Awesome. I'm so excited about the launch of StableX.org. I think it is going to be an amazing consumer application and product and really usable place for individuals to go and explore stablecoins and digital assets. And I also think it is going to be a really awesome platform within the Stellar ecosystem for other issuers and anchors. So really excited about all of the work you are doing. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing this announcement today, Pablo.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much.
All right. So now we're going to jump back into things, and I have got the answer to your quiz. So how quickly does a ledger close on Stellar? Every 3 to 5 seconds. So yes, folks, it is extremely fast. So now we're going to go talk about how businesses are leveraging that really fast ledger time to execute B2B payments on Stellar. And SDF's own Christine, too, is going to tell us more. So, Christine, I think I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone. My name is Christine Tim, Director of Partnerships at the Stellar Development Foundation. And today, I will be moderating today's panel, Global Entry, B2B Cross-Border Payments with Stellar. And today we have our guests from all over the world. We're starting off with Meinhard Ben, the CEO of Satoshi Pay, based in Germany. We also have Jean Desnegay, the CEO of Stable Corp, based in Canada. And I think we were having some difficult technical difficulties, but Bayo, the CEO of Cowrie Systems, based out of Nigeria, may be here or maybe not. So today, one of the things that excites me about today's panel is that each participant is running a B2B cross-border payments business from a different part of the world. And the end result is that you guys are serving your customers on Stellar. So I'd love to kick this off, one, by providing our audience a quick introduction of your background, and also what products and services are you offering to your customers to serve them today? To kick it off, Meinhard, would you start?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, happy to be here. Again, second Meridian. It's a great honor to be on a panel again, this time with a slightly changed business model or a new product. So just as an introduction, many people know, but I started Satoshi Pay in 2014. And we started on the Bitcoin network, and then Bitcoin became too expensive for us with fees up to 50 euros or $50 per transaction at that time. And 2017, we, as one of the first businesses in the Stellar ecosystem, we embraced the Stellar Ledger to work on it with our projects. Simply because it had everything we needed already in production, so we could focus on implementing our customers and finding new customers, and not building the technical base, because it was essentially all there. Faster, cheaper transactions, scalability built in, multi-sig support, and things like time bounds and an exchange at protocol level. And all this without smart contracts, because also at that time around 2017 there have been some of the great smart contract hacks where 150 million got lost, and that kind of made us very cautious about which ledger to choose and how certain features that we need are implemented. And we like the protocol approach, or the near protocol, near core protocol approach of Stellar very much, and also the developer ecosystem around it, and also of course the initial support by the foundation as soon as we reached out to them was quite great. And now we are running 3 products on Stellar. So the first, and that's what we're mostly known for, is our micropayment for content, sort of the Satoshi Pay classic, and which Tim Berners-Lee famously in the keynote called very interesting. So that was a great honor to hear that from the inventor of the World Wide Web. And so this is definitely something that we're going in the right direction there. And we also launched Solar Wallet, which is an open source implementation of the Stellar protocol as a wallet, a consumer wallet on all major platforms. And we focused on easy to use interface and also great multi-signature support, and also asset exchange in an easy interface. So having the sort of exchange built in. And this year we launched D-Transfer, which is an instant cross-border money transfer for businesses, a service, and it runs as a software as a service. And the focus here is on near instant or instant bank-to-bank transfers. So we completely encapsulate all the blockchain logic and show the user or the business in this case how everything can work faster and more efficiently without exposing them to blockchain language necessarily. It's just that we pass on the benefits and we sort of hide most of the blockchain complexity from the user. And we're already live with transactions to Nigeria and with Cowrie, obviously, and also to the US, from and to the US. And yeah, for example, that's something that shows how powerful this can be. We did a test transfer and it took about 20 seconds for funds to arrive on a Nigerian bank account, thanks to Cowrie's integration. And that's really something that shows the power, how fast and efficient money transfer can be in the future or also already in the present. Yeah, so that's kind of a quick introduction on what we're doing. We are based in Berlin as a company, and yeah, these days with many people being remote, we also have some people working remotely. But yeah, that's kind of where we're operating from, and London as well, where we have lots of investor contacts, and yeah, where we are, our holding is also registered.
Great, that's fantastic. So it sounds like you guys have built an application layer on top of Stellar, leveraging the anchors to help you process these global payments, correct?
So your audio is kind of breaking off a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
So it sounds like you've built an application layer on top of Stellar so that you can process these payments for your customers, correct? That's
correct. Yeah, so we sort of visualize it as a middle layer or a middleware, something that's all of our services can use, that's connecting to the Stellar blockchain. And on top of that, we built our different business products or different products for different applications. Yeah.
So Jean, I'd love for you to provide a bit of context on your background and what you guys are offering on Stellar, because you guys are coming into the ecosystem as an anchor, which is, it's a different perspective, but at the same time, you're also able to serve your customers with processing these global B2B payments.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Hello, Christine?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, you cut out for a moment, I apologize. So my name is Jean de Gagny. I'm a reformed or recovering banker, depending on how you look at it. I've spent most of my career as a senior executive in a series of banks, stock exchanges, and CEO of clearinghouses. I retired from that a couple of years ago and have been working on a bunch of projects, including the Canada stablecoin QCAD. You know, I've believed in the last number of years that capital markets and financial markets, as we know them, are going to become completely digitized relative to the analog world that we know now. But I also believe that that will only happen when we replicate the robust financial market infrastructures that exist in analog land, and that is, you know, infrastructures that are robust, that are regulated, that are scalable, that are led by adults, for lack of a better word, and so we've been working hard to create the stablecoin in Canada as a key building block and enabler of what we see as the digital capital markets here to facilitate all sorts of use cases that I'll come back to in a moment. When we launched our stablecoin in the earlier part of this year, we, to be candid, we built it on ERC20. That was path of least resistance. It was just something everyone understood. You know, we continue to use that, but as everyone knows, it's not fast. Getting slower, it's not expensive, it's expensive, getting more expensive, and it really isn't, as we look forward, the foundation that we think we will need to truly be able to scale this thing. And so we've been talking to Stellar, and they're quite excited to bring our stablecoin onto this platform because it does scale well, because it is fast, because it is inexpensive, and because, as we're seeing today, there's a very strong ecosystem of other players in this space that we can help enable and that can help us grow our business as well. And so to us, that's particularly significant. You know, I think you've heard earlier today other people talk about some of the use cases around stable coins. You know, Pablo just talked about a stablecoin exchange to facilitate this. We look at QCAD as something that will certainly facilitate payments And as we link on, we're going to be joining with other ecosystem partners like Remitter and others to be able to facilitate payments using Canadian dollars through our stable coin. Canadian dollar being a very stable, reliable currency. We look at foreign exchange as a very powerful use case, both for reasons of just moving money out of countries. And I love Jeremy's story earlier about the brain wallet. What an incredible way to think about moving wealth around. Like the other speaker, I'm not sure I can remember my key, but we'll see. But once you have the ability to move wealth through stable coins between different currencies, you really facilitate a lot of things, including payments. But you facilitate just the movement of wealth, the preservation of wealth, and you do it without paying. I know in Canada, our Canadian banks make $1 billion or more a year just with the FX spreads between buying and selling dollar Canada and dollars against Brazil and all that kind of stuff. And I think with the types of markets that we're creating, the infrastructure that we have and that Pablo and others are building, you can create a vehicle to trade foreign exchange, whether it's to move payments or wealth, or whether it's just to trade foreign exchange in a way that has much less friction than the traditional financial system has, in a manner that's significantly less expensive than our traditional financial system. So that's a use case that's actually quite exciting for me. And we really believe that the Stellar infrastructure and ecosystem is going to make the creation of those types of businesses much simpler, and will allow us to scale much more quickly than we have been able to date.
So that, what you just said really resonates with me, because, at the foundation every day we come into work and we think about what is it that we can do today that will create equitable access to the global financial system. So the use case that you just mentioned, having your asset be openly tradable for anyone. And Jean, you have a deep background in banking and also capital markets. So can you just shed some light how powerful this application is in terms of just democratizing payments within the global sector, the B2B sector, and also just in general, where people simply didn't have this type of access before? You would have to go to a bank.
The democratization has a couple of sort of angles to it. One of it, because it is so scalable and inexpensive and fast, you can provide a lot of people access to the financial markets that don't have it through traditional means. To open a bank account, you need ID, you need all sorts of things that many people around the world don't have to hand. And here, if you have a cellular phone or you have something like that, a piece of technology that allows you to access the internet, you're actually able to participate in the capital markets in the same manner that someone very wealthy with his private banking account at JP Morgan can do. So from that perspective, it's democratization. From another perspective, one of the reasons that we have many of the financial market infrastructures we have today in analog land is we create all of those for trust. I need to trust someone that you're going to get paid. I need to trust the thing I'm going to pay you with. And so we have stock exchanges and clearinghouses and banks and all these types of things there because we need them to trust. I've been talking to a stock exchange that wants to tokenize all of their stocks, which is, relatively easy to do, to tokenize stock. The kicker is that when I give you my tokenized stock and sell it to you, I kind of want my money, in that same moment. And because that doesn't work in analog land, we've created very expensive clearinghouses. I used to run one. In this kind of world, with the use cases that we're talking about here and the platform and the ecosystem that Stellar has, you're actually able to create all of that without having to build these large organizations with large overheads and therefore large fees. You don't have to have monopoly organizations in every country which are set up for safety and soundness purposes. You actually can create a much simpler way to do all of this. And again, to go back to my opening point, that will only truly happen when these things are built in very robust, regulated, audited, stable kind of ways by adults. But as I look at the people on your Stellar platform and the types of organizations that we're building, we're actually building the foundation of this truly adult digital capital markets for the future, with the added benefit, to your point, that it will be much easier to access by anyone in the world without having to rely on the arbitrary and, should I say, capricious rules that some large institutions currently put in place.
So I like to pivot a bit. Meinhard, I was reading a research report from Research and Markets the other day, and one of the fascinating topics that they were talking about is, of all the companies that they've surveyed in France and also Germany, they said that these companies, about 1/3 of these companies said they are willing and open to paying, any of their digital subscriptions or any bills with an e-wallet. So I thought this was fascinating because in the traditional world of enterprises and also companies, they generally pay with a bank or bank transfer wire. So I'd like to, hear from you. Have you seen some of these trends, amongst your own business and some of the demand or appetite from your own customers in terms of wanting these new electronic and digital applications?
So certainly we see an appetite for our product in general, especially the D-transfer product, because everybody sort of complains about banks when it's about international money transfer. Like no one really likes it or likes doing it. So people are hungry for alternatives to that. So it's really a fertile ground for any sort of disruption. And especially also we focus on some part of our sort of payout mechanism is to pay out in digital tokens, meaning in stable coins. So you could receive on a Stellar wallet a bank payment in, let's say, US dollar tokens or in Naira tokens directly without even using the banking system, and therefore sort of bypassing the banking system on the receiving end. And this could be then forwarded by the business to some other suppliers that they have connected to the same network. And so we sort of are now dealing with small SMEs where young people are in charge of payments and they are digital natives, and for them it's absolutely expected from consumer apps to pay everything within seconds, and it arrives, and they don't want to go through that hassle and waiting, and they don't understand how a payment can be lost, in the way that, we don't know where your money is. That happens. And then you have to file a research request for your money. And that's something that's just not acceptable for these young entrepreneurs. And that's what we're seeing, that they sort of expect that and they look for solutions that can offer that. And blockchain-based solutions can do that. Also, from my personal experience, I'm sort of like a blockchain native by now. And I started doing international business when I was already firmly within blockchain. And so my default was that, money arrives on the other side of the planet within 10 minutes. And that's what I kind of expected. And then I kind of had to deal with banks, and I was like, just surprised at how slow it is. And I'm like, okay, I want to bring this, what I'm used to since 2011, to businesses around the world. And that's really also the driving vision here, that's making these advantages available to people around the world. Yeah, John has a question or like a remark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the, I'm older than you, so I wasn't a digital native. But one of the challenges that we still have to deal with in this is that there still is a, for people who have wealth in fiat, which many certainly people who are old like me have, the challenge is getting that wealth from fiat land into token land or digital land, and it's an issue that we still haven't cracked in a very efficient way in most developed countries. Part of that is that there's a lot of regulation that gets in the way. But what we're building will truly be fantastic if we can crack that particular little problem at the front end, which is how do you actually, in a very efficient way, get fiat into this ecosystem without undue delays and undue other sort of processes.
Well, Jean, you're contributing to pushing that solution forward as a cat anchor on Stellar. So we have roughly about 10 minutes left, and we've gotten a handful of good questions. So I'd like to turn over to the audience. And the first question is, Jean, how did you make your anchor model profitable? And what advice would you give to companies who want to become anchors to identify profitable business models today?
So our So thank you, Christine. So our business model is not yet profitable. The sources of revenue that we've identified in a stable coin is really just two. One of which is to the extent that you bring in fiat that underpins your stable coin, and our stable coin will be completely backed up by 100% fiat. That's audited and transparent. You can invest that float and earn a return on that. That's largely how Warren Buffett made his money, investing the float in the insurance companies he owned. So to the extent that we bring in Canadian dollars to underpin the QCAD stablecoin, we can invest that and earn proceeds. If interest rates were higher, that would be a more exciting model. Interest rates in our country are certainly extremely low, and so that's not the most profitable model. But as we look to use cases like foreign exchange and payments and other types of things, there's the opportunity also to charge transaction fees, which will be materially smaller than the huge transaction fees that analog providers like banks and others provide. But those transaction fees will also drive revenue. And the beauty of this business is, and I think Meinhardt's business is probably very similar, this is a fixed cost business. Once you build the machine and have the controls and processes and all these other things in place, every incremental dollar of revenue becomes revenue for us and bottom line profit. And so the key then to scaling, the key to being profitable is scaling. And so being on a platform like this, where there's a lot of ecosystem partners that we can enable and therefore share in some of the fees that get generated, is actually how we grow this. You need a very good product, and then you need an ecosystem that will help you scale quickly, and then it's extremely profitable, because once you've covered your fixed costs, it's a very profitable business.
Great. There's another interesting question, and this is to Meinhardt and Jean, but what are some of the threats within your markets that keep you up at night?
It's always the keeping up at night question, right? Obviously, regulation for us, it's not really a threat. It's a big challenge that we have to deal, especially on the on and off ramp part, dealing with anchors, with very fragmented regulation. Like each country is different, and the technology might be standardized or is standardized through the Sedan Network, but sort of the different AML and KYC regulations in these countries are sometimes changing, getting more strict, or getting more open or more detailed. And so kind of a small threat would be that maybe one country locks it up completely, or asks for too many things that the customer would not be willing to give. So that's a bit of a threat, but that's also a threat that other sort of transfer services have to deal with. But that's really kind of a headache. Another threat or challenge, I would call it more, is market making, also to create liquidity on the Stellar Decentralized Exchange, to actually handle that volume that we might have. So let's say we have a lot of customers that send maybe millions a month from A to B, but then we also need to match these foreign exchange orders on the exchange, and there needs to be entities that are technically capable, also sort of advanced and pioneering to fulfill these orders on this completely new system that they might not be accustomed to, and with new challenges also in their regulatory departments, obviously.
Jean?
So I certainly agree with the market making and the fact that this is a scale issue as well. This will work really, really well when we're all really scaled. The challenge, we've got to get from here to there. So that's certainly it. I agree with Meinhardt on regulation, and I would nuance that to say, I said earlier, for this to really work, it has to be well regulated, but well is the important word. The regulation has to be intelligent, has to help the regulator meet their mandate without imposing a whole bunch of unnecessary or frankly counterproductive types of regulation. And in Canada, the regulators are late to the game as relates to all of this type of stuff. And so you have either the problem of operating in a space where you don't know what the regulation will be, and so you're taking a chance and hoping that what you build is actually going to meet some rules that haven't yet been established. The US is much further ahead than we are in Canada, particularly around the business I'm in, which is stable coins. The banks understand the rules that they have to follow to bank people like us. In Canada, because there aren't rules, the banks, certainly the big banks, are afraid of us. They're afraid of what the regulator will do to them if they bank us. And so you end up having to bank with smaller banks who know that they're the only game in town and whose banking fees are, unreasonable. And so intelligent regulation, I think, is the good thing. Non-intelligent regulation would be the thing that worries me a lot. I also worry about central bank digital currencies. You might argue that if you have central bank digital currencies around the world, you may not need stable coins. I'm not sure that's the case, because I suspect they're going to take a while to build them. They talk a good game, but we're years away from having any of those. I suspect they're going to want to build in capabilities to, if not eliminate anonymity, at least to limit it in some way, because that's part of their mandate. This would be a great way for them to control money laundering if they know who owns every token. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for stable coins like ours to actually still play a role. But at the limit, they could outlaw us, right? So the whole CBDC kind of evolution is something we pay close attention to. And the last thing I would raise is kind of more of a loosey-goosey risk, that every time you have an accident in the marketplace, like Cred, like Quadriga, like others, everyone gets afraid, and we all get painted with that same reputational risk. And that's why we emphasize in all of our conversations that we're adults, we're doing this the right way, we're not taking shortcuts. We're going to build the things we have to build and follow the regulation we have to follow. We're going to be transparent. But every time there's an accident, you end up having to, tell your story again, explain again why, we're not going to run away with all your money. So those are the things that keep me sort of up at night.
Great. So what fascinates me is that the both of you are from different, regions of the world. And what's beautiful about Stellar is that we've all been brought together because of the ecosystem, not only that, but the platform and how it can serve you and your customers. This is something that's very powerful in terms of just enabling people to have access to these payments, not only that, but to have access to the outside world, wherever they're from. So with that said, I'd love to conclude today's session. And there's other sessions after this, so please stay tuned. And if you like to do any networking with any of our panelists or folks from the SDF, please join one of our networking sessions or virtual lounges after this.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for hosting the panel. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christine, and our panelists. And I will second Christine's suggestion to not delay on the networking and head over to the virtual lounges. Building networks and building ecosystems is all about making connections. So definitely encourage all of you all to do that. So up next, we are going to dive into all things liquidity. We have a short break for you, but after that break, we'll be back with a quiz and then also filming. The Stellar Development Foundation's head of liquidity will be leading a really awesome panel around liquidity with guests including Catherine Cooley from Binance US, Theo Gonella from ZeroX Labs, and Scott Freeman from JST Capital. So don't go too far. We'll be back with the quiz. All right, welcome back. And it is quiz time. And I've got another numbers question for you. Your question is, how many accounts are on Stellar right now? Let's see if any of you are faster than everyone else who's Googling. First two correct answers win. See you back here in a minute with the answer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bianca. I'm an attorney in the SDF legal team, working with the product team that is launching the Vibrant app. And one of the things I love about working at Stellar at the SDF is that as a lawyer, it's very exciting to be working at the intersection of, on the one hand, this crazy new disruptive technology, and on the other hand, the existing regulatory regime, which has often been around for maybe up to 100 years. And it's always really fun to try and fit new emergent technologies into existing legal structures. It can be frustrating, but within that uncertainty and in those gray areas, there's also lots of possibilities, whether it's sort of new structures that are emerging, or whether it's developing new specific laws that will help support the widespread and mainstream scaling of crypto and blockchain. So I'm excited and grateful to be at SDF as we move towards that goal. And that's my intro. Enjoy Meridian.
All right, welcome back, Meridian. For all the quiz takers out there, the answer to how many accounts are currently on the Stellar Ledger is 4.6 million accounts. Excited to see which one of you got that answer first. So our next panel is ready to go, and they're going to talk about all things exchanges, liquidity, and asset conversion. On Stellar, anyone can issue an asset. And there's an inbuilt decentralized exchange where assets can be exchanged for any other asset in the ecosystem. This functionality is powerful, but how does the conversion really occur? Who are the participants? Where does the capital come from? And are there things that can make and improve liquidity within the ecosystem? I'm excited to hear the insights from our guests, and I will now hand it over to SDF's very own Phil Meng. Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello, Meridian. Welcome to the Liquidity Exchanges and Conversion panel. I'm Phil Meng. I head up liquidity strategy at SDF. I have a background in equity derivatives trading and market making, starting from the physical exchanges of the American Stock Exchange and then electronic desks at proprietary desks. As Lisa mentioned, Stellar has a decentralized exchange, or DEX, built within its protocol. Any Stellar asset can, in theory, be exchanged for any other Stellar asset on the exchange, as long as there's liquidity in each of those assets. So liquidity is essential for an exchange to occur. This means there needs to be someone, someone's, or something on the other side of any conversion. This often requires the need for market makers, liquidity providers, or other market participants. Enabling and growing liquidity is a challenge for any new asset or new venue, and I'm excited to have a wonderful panel to share their experiences and talk about how they think about liquidity, exchanges, and asset conversion. First, we have Catherine Coley. She's the CEO of cryptocurrency exchange Binance US. That's the US arm of Binance.com. She comes from a background of FX sales and trading at bulge bracket banks and spent some time in Hong Kong and London. We also have Scott Freeman. He's the co-founder of JST Capital. They are a crypto trading firm providing execution, trading, and advisory services. He also has an extensive background from the traditional FX trading world at large banks. And finally, we have Theo Ganella. He's a product manager at 0x. 0x is an open protocol for peer-to-peer exchange of tokenized assets whose mission is to help tokenized value flow freely. He has a more technical background from the engineering and product development side. So I think having perspectives from the exchange side, the liquidity provider side, and the technical side will offer some interesting and contrasting perspectives. So I'd love to just start off with where liquidity comes from. And this question is for Catherine. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having liquidity and, broadly speaking, where liquidity comes from? And using Binance US as a proxy when it first launched, how did you guys attract liquidity to the exchange?
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. So Binance US is actually an independent entity and therefore had to build its liquidity from scratch. We don't share our order books with Binance, but we do license the technology for the matching engine and allowing us to deliver the best of class technology to American users through a regulated platform. So when we were building out the platform, we had to build liquidity from the ground up. What does that mean? Well, a lot of it, you have to remember, comes back to the people that are needing the liquidity. And so it's back to your simple, bring out the whiteboard, supply and demand of building a market from the ground up. So knowing those in the market that we're going to be happy to be both makers, and then those in the market that we're going to be demanding it, or the takers, you have to have a kind of a constant balance between those participants in the market and build tools and products for them that they're eager and excited about. And so that's really how we began building it. So first step was knowing a lot of the key folks in the space and getting them on board on our platform, signing them up, going through the corporate onboarding process with some of our key institutional partners. We've got great relationships with market makers from both my past at Morgan Stanley and knowing several of them while working through Ripple. And so it was really exciting to be able to lean on those that were looking to build out liquidity on a new marketplace. Oftentimes that allows for different price discovery that can either allow them to engage in arbitrage or being able to facilitate markets, which is a beneficial strategy for many of those players. So on top of that, we had to make sure that we have depth in our order books to facilitate customers and retail investors looking to buy and sell digital assets on an order book form. So that's really where liquidity begins. It's with the people.
Great, that makes sense. And I kind of would love to contrast that from decentralized exchange, given that Stellar has a DEX and we've seen some challenges in growing that liquidity. So Theo, from 0x's perspective, can you talk a little bit about decentralized exchanges and some of the different challenges that you guys have faced in terms of growing liquidity and how you've thought about improving liquidity at 0x?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, by the way, and hi everyone. Well, there are a lot of similarities with what Catherine mentioned. Obviously, when you start from scratch, this is really the art and science of two-sided marketplaces. You need to start from one side, but then one side wants the other one, and so it's always a balancing act. And yes, to piggyback on what Catherine said, it's really about the people. So even on our side, we had to start from particularly innovative firms that were interested in the crypto space, and also were looking with interest at the decentralized space, which has a lot of challenges. And so we nurtured those relationships. We basically illustrated the opportunity on the decentralized exchange side, and those relationships have grown over the years, and now we are onboarding more and more professional market makers in the platform. Decentralized exchanges pose a lot of challenges versus the centralized exchanges world, and the main difference comes with the fact that basically the execution of the trade there's less control over it. That's really the underlying difference. In a public blockchain, basically you request to execute a trade, but you don't know when it's going to happen, and it depends on the market conditions. Whereas in a centralized exchange, it's basically a serialized machine that executes all the orders in order, basically, and has more control. This results in a lot of challenges on the user side. If you have ever used a decentralized exchange, you submit the request, and then you're there like waiting. And also on the liquidity provider side, because you don't want to be mispriced. And usually the exchange, which sits in the middle, tries to remove those uncertainties as much as possible. And that's if you want, the innovation on the technology side. And what we've been doing in 0x concretely is we started from an open order book model, which is a very, if you want, relaxed model where we leave it to the UIs to figure out the matching, which gives a lot of burden on the UIs too. But we've been innovating on that space, introducing other models like RFQ, which brings more certitude, if you want, on the liquidity provider side, and therefore better pricing on the other side. Decentralized exchanges, though, obviously have other interesting advantages versus centralized exchanges when it comes to liquidity. It can be aggregated, for example. That's all this concept about composability. They never stop running. That's kind of the mantra around decentralized exchanges. And also they offer other interesting models of participation in bootstrapping liquidity. AMMs, automated market makers, are the best example of that.
Great. So I do want to come back to kind of the AMM model, but I kind of want to go to Scott real quick, because Scott, presumably you are the people that both Catherine and Theo are talking about as the participants of providing liquidity on exchanges. So Can you talk a little bit about like the major considerations for where you decide to provide liquidity, and also where you decide to consume liquidity?
Cool. Hey, thanks, Phil, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk and spend some time with you guys. Yeah, so having a background in traditional finance, in many respects, trading here in the crypto world is much more complex. So in traditional finance, you generally have a credit relationship and trade on one or two exchanges. Price discovery is pretty clean. Your technology is pretty clean. In the crypto world, there are many more variables you need to think about, right? You need to think about price. What is our asset cost? Where can you buy it and sell it? You need to think about how deep the market is. How much can you trade at that price? You need to think about the technology. Every exchange is different. Every exchange has different technology. They're either located in a different jurisdiction, or the technology is better or worse. Technology generally has gotten much better over the last 6 months to 9 months, but there still have challenges across many exchanges. On top of that, you have questions around jurisdiction and regulation and credit, right? So you need to understand where the exchange is located that you're trading with. Is the exchange regulated? Is the exchange not regulated? What's your credit exposure? Right? Because you may have assets at 10, 15, 20 different exchanges in 10 different jurisdictions. So you need to have good legal counsel. You need to understand the issues that may be involved with any of those jurisdictions, and just be prepared. I mean, there have been exchanges more recently that have shut down withdrawals, right? There have been exchanges that have gone dark for a few days. So you need to you just need to understand the risks involved with trading in all those jurisdictions. So even though you may get the best price somewhere, you may not want to trade there, or you may want to limit your trading there if you're concerned about the credit or regulatory risk in a jurisdiction. With exchanges, what we find is very important as well is just support, right? Things go wrong. There are issues sometimes. You can't get assets out, a trade fails, a message gets lost. Things happen, right? And it's great to be able to pick up the phone and have someone on the other side of the phone answer questions, chase an issue, help you out with a problem. So it's been very interesting for us over the years. We've been in crypto for 6 or 7 years at this point, seeing how things have evolved, and seeing in some respects it's gotten better than traditional markets, but in many respects it's just it's a much more complex calculus you have to go through when you decide where to trade and how to trade. And then if you get to the DEX space, all those issues still exist on some level. You need, not only that, you need to understand the technology, right? In some of the DEXs, there have been some technology issues where people have, found pretty impressive arbitrage opportunities and taken advantage of protocol issues in the technology. You need to understand that as well. You need to understand how the order book works. If there are AMMs there, you need to understand how the AMMs work. So it's a very, the longer I'm in this space, the more I keep on thinking it's going to become more and more centralized and more consistent across all the different platforms. But I think what we have found, what we've been surprised about, it's becoming more and more fragmented and decentralized. So even at the exchange level, there continues to be lots of fragmentation. And now that with the increasing number of decentralized protocols, that's just leading to even more increased decentralization across the whole ecosystem. So we've been fascinated by that, and makes our job a little more challenging when we're trading for ourselves or trading for our clients.
And when you mention, with a centralized exchange, you could pick up the phone and call someone. Do you think that's going to be a major hurdle for decentralized exchanges? Because in a decentralized exchange, there's no one to call.
Yeah, I think it is a challenge, Phil, but I think what will end up happening is that they'll hire people to do this trading for them, right? So they'll say, hey, I want to trade on a decentralized exchange. Let me hire a broker. Let me hire someone who has expertise to manage those issues, who can deal with those problems. Problems will come up. We trade on decentralized exchanges every day, right? And we've gotten better at it, but there are still either daily or weekly where issues come up where you're just, orders get hung, trades don't get completed. It's an ongoing challenge. I mean, I've been in this space long enough that when we started trading, one of the exchanges for error messages used to send us back smiley faces. Now we don't get that anymore. That was kind of fun when it happened. It was kind of funny. It was it wasn't a fixed message. It was just a message came back from the API. So we're not at that level anymore. But things still come up, and it's as long as you've been in electronic trading, systematic trading, we're always kept on our toes. Put it that way.
That makes sense. And I kind of want to stick on this thread, Catherine, and direct this question to Catherine. Do you see the growth in decentralized exchanges complementary to centralized exchanges, or do you think they're more a competitive force?
I'm absolutely complimentary. We're way too early right now to start having sharks and jets in terms of what we're building. For our benefit, we provide really a regulated on-ramp into anything digital. So that's really allowing us to convert your hard dollars into digital assets. Where you take those digital assets from there is really up to you. And we provide both the off-ramps. There's some great on-ramps in crypto that still keep you inside of their system, but we certainly allow you to take your funds and allow you to keep your coins and move them where you please. So where we become a great on-ramp, we've got a selection of DeFi coins that we already have available on the platform that lets you move a little bit quicker into those other projects in the DeFi space. So whether it's DAI, Maker, even Uniswap, we've got on our platform that really allow people then to just be able to make that conversion into dollars or out of dollars easily, because DeFi still is still pretty crypto to crypto.
Makes sense. So Theo, I kind of want to go back to you and talk about AMMs and the explosive growth of DeFi over the past 6 months. So for people that aren't familiar with what an AMM is, can you just give a quick explanation of what an AMM is and how you guys think AMMs stack up and compare against an order book? And I'm not going to ask you to make a reference to a musical as Catherine did so brilliantly.
Well, yeah, I won't do that either, but I want to also kind of also stress the fact that, yes, I absolutely think that they are complementary, to go back to the previous question. And actually, a lot of the liquidity providers that they provide liquidity on the RFQ system that I mentioned earlier, they do cross-hedge on centralized exchanges. So in a way, the centralized and decentralized world from a liquidity perspective are already kind of connected, and they need each other. So there is that aspect too. So absolutely, the more we grow the pie, the better off. It's not a zero-sum game, basically. So absolutely. From the AMM side, yes, AMMs have been kind of the surprise of, not really the surprise of the year, but yeah, their growth has been like tremendous. Right now, the decentralized exchange space on Ethereum, thanks to the Uniswaps and all the other models, sees volume in a week that was seen in a year, in the entire 2019. So it's pretty crazy, the explosion in terms of volume. And I think the biggest benefit that these AMM models are bringing is the fact that they solve the one side of the marketplace we mentioned earlier. Basically, they allow to crowdsource liquidity. So anyone that basically has some assets available, they can just show up with their assets, deposit them into a contract, and instantly they are earning fees, but they also are liquidity providers. That's in a nutshell the model that has allowed the Uniswaps and all the other AMMs to solve one side of the marketplace, and instantly all these pairs are available. And the trick around the A letter in the AMM, which is automatic market maker, is the fact that there's always someone on the other side of the trade. So that's what makes it so powerful and creates flywheels that allows, again, to bootstrap markets and have instantly available these markets to users. They do suffer from some problems. I don't think we need to go into those, but they're around, capital efficiency, basically, from a liquidity provider perspective. And that's really, if you want, the advantage of the order book model. So AMMs versus order book. From a user perspective, really there shouldn't be any difference, meaning a trader comes and just wants a good price and good depth in the book. But from a liquidity perspective, from a liquidity provider perspective, what really the institution wants is an efficient way to allocating capital, and order book allows for that more than an AMM. And that comes from a fidelity standpoint, meaning an order book can represent an AMM, but an AMM cannot represent an order book. It's kind of a bit of a technical way of seeing things, but this allows for operators like Scott's companies and others to be a little bit more agile on how they move their liquidity and how they make money. Whereas with AMMs, you need to deposit it there, and you're not really getting the biggest buck for a penny. And but the cons, obviously, on the order book models on decentralized exchanges, especially, is the matching of the liquidity. And what I mentioned earlier around AMMs, there's always someone on the other side, which is the contract itself, the machine itself will fill the trade, will be on the other side. But on the order book models, you need two sides available, and the matching of that is a little bit more complicated, and that's really what firms like 0x Labs are really investing in terms of making this exchange more efficient.
Okay, great. I kind of want to open this next question up to both Scott and Catherine. Given both your experiences on large FX desks, how do you see liquidity and risk management scaling in either, just in crypto in general?
Catherine, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll talk about a couple of advancements we've seen since I got into crypto, and then would love to know, Scott, how actually useful they are. So we've seen just a build out in the ability for different software layers to help those market makers navigate across different vendors or centralized exchanges or decentralized platforms. And that's really benefited a lot of these market makers because the manual process of removing coins from one platform and putting them onto another, or having pooled capital on both of them, really take out the benefit of digital assets and put you back in that kind of old banking problems where prime brokers were the solution for that. So I think some of the advancements we've seen from a fiat side into the crypto is the Sedan Silvergate network, which we've launched for our institutional customers, allowing them to move dollars very quickly in and out of platforms 24/7. And then on the crypto side, and additionally going forward, is Fireblocks, which just recently raised a large round and are continuing to help aid the ability for folks to be able to move funds quickly between vendors. And we see this kind of function being built out more as part of the infrastructure that is required to help markets become more efficient. So I'm excited to see those processes kind of be built out and help people navigate multiple venues a little bit better. But I'd love to hear from Scott's side if he's actually using them, or his own own strategies are good enough, and they're not looking for that diversity of venues.
Yeah, I think we use some of them, Catherine. At the end of the day, we're big enough and think we're technically proficient enough to manage some of these things ourselves without having to go to a vendor. I think some of the interesting things that we're seeing in this space, I think for our clients who come to us and say, hey, earn returns on our assets, help us access the ecosystem, return is everything, right? So I think the interesting thing about this ecosystem is that you get returns on your assets, whether it's in DeFi, on exchanges, trading swaps, things like that. I think that's a nice evolution of the marketplace, where it's easier for people to identify how you get returns on your assets and monetize assets. We think over time that will be a theme that continues to play out, where people will say, if you want me to leave my assets on your exchange or in your DeFi protocol, what am I going to earn for keeping assets there? There must be some value attached to it. There's value to the exchange, there's value to the DeFi protocol. So being able to share in that value at a client level, I think is very important. We're seeing that already, and we think that will continue to grow next year. We think the use of stable coins will continue to grow. We've been saying that for years. There's been a nice evolution. Stellar in particular has made some great growth in that area. We think next year that will continue to evolve and grow. We think the DeFi protocols like Stellar are great for payments, moving monies instantaneously very quickly. And we think that there will be continued growth and evolution in the whole stablecoin space. And then on top of that, then you'll be able to earn interest on your stable coins, just like you'd earn interest by putting money in a deposit account or buying a CD, things like that. So we think at the end of the day, these will be treated more and more like traditional assets. Things will be much more transparent. But for people like us who are active in all these markets and are looking to impress our clients every day and earn return on their assets, the important thing is just being able to transparently see what you'll return, what you'll earn on an asset, and be able to represent that back to your clients.
So I think both of you touched on this a little bit, but just looking forward, what do you guys think, and this is for everybody, what do you guys think is the most important development that will help improve liquidity and make conversions more efficient?
I can go. I think we need to go back to the marketplace idea. I tend to think we're in a moment where we are demand constraint, meaning I really think that from a liquidity provider standpoint, the liquidity providers have a lot of options. I tend to think, as Scott mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of innovation and growth in the avenues that liquidity providers have and choices that they have. I tend to think that liquidity will follow demand at this point. What really is holding the entire crypto ecosystem, centralized and decentralized, back is simply retail flow. We need more applications that enable people to onboard in this world through tokens and applications and delightful user experiences to then basically create this demand pressure that it's obviously my guess, but I tend to think that at this point we are demand constraint, meaning the liquidity suppliers are just ready to go given an interesting, consistent retail flow from a trader perspective. We are not at a stage where basically we can provide models like Robinhood, where market makers are paying to access that consistent retail flow. And that's really what I think this space needs at this point. Liquidity providers are ready to go and ready to embark on the investments that are needed to start providing liquidity on crypto. But what we need is basically more users and more people trading.
Phil, I would add to that a little bit. In addition to the more people, I think that having been in FX for years before running a hedge fund and having familiarity with payments and decentralized finance, I think what surprises me is how decentralized and fragmented the whole payments segment is. I don't know how many billions of dollars a year people earn by processing payments and charging fees, but it's just still an incredibly decentralized ecosystem. I think for DEXs like Stellar and others that are looking to automate that, improve it, reduce the cost, there's just so many hops along the chain. Things take so long to allow the person in the United States that wants to send pesos back to their family in Mexico, whether it's $50 a week or $500 a week, to be able to give them an ability to do that in real time and not pay a 5% fee is very, very challenging. There are lots of hops and lots of pieces that you have to pull together. So putting the liquidity in the middle via the DEX is great, but there are just a lot of other pieces of the puzzle that have to be connected. And then on top of that, you have all sorts of other issues involving credit and settling and things like that. So I think it's an incredibly fragmented problem to solve. We do think it'll start getting solved more easily next year. And we think improving the credit within the ecosystem will help solve that problem as well.
Hey,
Catherine, do you have anything?
Yeah, Scott, you bring up a great point, and I think we take for granted often in the crypto space the complexities that the rest of the world has been running on. Scott and I come from an FX background, and that's fine and dandy because we've been focused on purely making trades in very effective markets through electronic trading or through voice brokers, and we really rarely touched the backside like flow of getting those funds in, the credit management, the risk management systems that were all occurring inside of the banks already. And so same with payments, you break down, okay, well, I've got a Visa connection. Well, it's actually, you've got a payment processor, you've got a card acquirer, you've got all of these, rather than decentralized, siloed businesses that have been thriving on the fact that they are critical to a complete life cycle of a payment. So that's something that's just in crypto, while we want to be solving things for, for the individual with super amounts of ease, we're not decentralizing or democratizing one variation of it. We're affecting multiple business types that are in there, and they were built in different ways because they're so complex. So I think that's something that we just oftentimes have to remind ourselves in the crypto space is, okay, you can solve the liquidity issue. That's that's one step, but can you solve the end payment or the processing out to the consumer? Someone in Mexico might not want to be receiving digital assets. They might want to be receiving cash in hand, not even through a card in means, because the shops or the payments that they're having to provide need to be cash. So it's really that cycle of understanding how we're getting it into the hands of the users in the means that they would prefer it, and how we can change that narrative so that people are preferring more digital means of payments, and having those waters meet will really be kind of what helps us be successful. I think we're seeing a little bit of that come in with payroll, which is an interesting thing, and having folks now kind of turning their heads and going, both from a corporate treasury perspective as well as an employee perspective, could I be paid in Bitcoin? Could I be paid in crypto? I prefer to be paid in crypto or Bitcoin because, here I've got a card that can also let me spend it. And so we're getting some of those puzzle pieces that will help us solve the full cycle of what we need. But at each step of that, you're going to need competency as well as a quality product that delivers what we need it to do in crypto. And that's often difficult because we're still so new as an industry.
Great. I think we're up on time. I might be able to take one. I apologize to the questions that were asked. I will try to get back to each of these questions after the conference. But yeah, I think we're up on time. I just want to thank each of you guys for joining me on this panel and providing all your great insights. And enjoy the rest of your pre-Friday, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Catherine, I'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, Scott, I'd love to catch up again.
Right,
same with you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Phil, and the rest of our panelists for that really interesting discussion. Liquidity is a key piece of facilitating things like cross-border payments. And it's really exciting to me to see such smart and capable individuals really thinking about how to tackle that problem. Well, we would love to hear your feedback on the session as well, so feel free to share that. And now, coming up after the break, we have a very special guest. Jordan Edelstein, SDF's own Chief Marketing Officer, will be joining us for a couple things to discuss. Curious what those are? Stay with us. We'll be back right after the break. well, who's ready to try and win some more swag? It's quiz time, and this quiz, your question is, which animal can be traded on the Stellar Network? Your options are a sheep, an elephant, or a tiger. While you're thinking about that one, as I mentioned, Jordan Edelstein, SDF CMO, is here to chat with us for a few minutes. So, Jordan, how's it going?
Good, Lisa. How are you?
I am doing well. I have really had a great time with Meridian, maybe a little tired after day 4, but overall just feeling really energized by this whole conference.
Yeah, and I saw you dancing to the hold music that was happening between the sessions. So running through all of our heads, we will be for weeks. So you and Justin have done an amazing job hosting this week. It's good to know you've got a fallback career if you ever decide to move out.
Thanks, Jordan.
Out of crypto. So, no, I think what I wanted to quickly talk to folks about is, obviously initially when we were planning this year's Meridian, we had plans for an in-person Meridian, saw what was going on and kind of quickly pivoted to a virtual one. And there are pros and cons to the experience, but there's been just so much work that's put in by the SDF marketing team, really everyone at SDF. It has been an entire group effort to pull this off. What I wanted to do here was really just, I know obviously after each session, the moderators and the hosts and everyone, we're pushing for feedback on sessions. This is a plug for, we're going to be sending out a broader survey on Meridian to get feedback, to really help influence not just future Meridians, whether they are in person or virtual or both, but even future virtual events. I mean, obviously we're going to be in this spot for at least the next half a year, it seems. And so, I think overall we're feeling good about how this week went. We tried to bring in some broader content as it relates to our theme, while also having a lot of Stellar specific content. Splitting the biz track and the tech track and having networking. We've tried to lighten it up with some of the breaks and other content as well. I know how popular the mug has become, and so Hot Property and the moderators in the chat sessions are becoming legendary figures. So, but yeah, I think we're obviously you mentioned early on. I remember in your opening, Lisa, about how we always really want feedback. We love hearing from people. We really need that, and so I know people get a lot of surveys. We're really hoping just people take the time to let us know what you thought. You're not going to hurt our feelings. What worked, what didn't. Half-day format, should we done whole days, all that kind of stuff. So plenty of opportunity to let us know how the week went through.
Huh. Cool. So what I hear you saying, Jordan, is this isn't just a survey that people will take and that will kind of then get thrown in the back somewhere and never really looked at. You guys really want to understand what people liked, what they didn't, and how we can curate content to more better serve the audience and the viewers and talk about things that people want to hear.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's similar to how, you guys on the ecosystem team work in terms of talking to members of the ecosystem, right? Like, we want to know what's working and what's not. What do you need more of? This pulling off a virtual event was a new, at this kind of scale was obviously a new experience for us. And so, it's a lot of firsts, a lot of stuff that we tried, and we know that some stuff probably really worked and some stuff maybe worked less, and that's okay. So, really just appreciate people taking the time to let us know. And, with next year, whether it's in person or virtual or both, which is really kind of what I'm hoping for, we want people to give us that honest feedback.
Okay, cool. Well, don't want to put you on the spot, but before I let you go, Jordan, I feel like I need to ask you if you have a favorite Meridian session. I'll say that mine, of course, was talking with President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. I also really enjoyed Reid Hoffman's discussion about networks this morning. I thought that was super interesting. So any session that really stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, the keynotes were great. I mean, I think whether it was President Sirleaf or Dr. Kim yesterday, really kind of connecting what we do at SDF and with kind of what's happening in the real world. On the first day, I thought the tokenization panel was a really good one. And the Crypto on Every Corner panel today, I mean, to see Meltem speaking with such passion for the industry and for driving adoption, it was really kind of infectious and fun to see. So those in particular were really good ones.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. And I feel confident that we're going to get some feedback to help us make future virtual events even better, although this one has really been incredible. And I guess I'll take this moment to also thank you and the incredible marketing team at SDF for all of the work you put into this event. It's really been quite special.
Thanks. I'm glad that you thought so, and you can keep that in mind.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we're going to go to a short break now, and then we will be back. So see you soon, everyone. All right, welcome back, Meridian. Well, the day is really flying by, and I can hardly believe that we're on our last day of virtual Meridian. So we've got a few sessions left that we're going to jump into. But first, I've got the answer to your last quiz question, which is sheep. Both sheep and wheat are used in the Stellar code base to describe arbitrary assets. This comes from a long tradition in trading and is really just a fun party fact that you have now. So next, moving to our next session, which is all about Stellar for merchants. I think it is probably all of our dreams to walk into the grocery store one day and have them ask us cash, check, or crypto when we go to checkout. And these next panelists are working to make that dream a reality. So with that, I will hand it over to Mark, who is SDF's Vice President of Business Development. Mark, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks again for Eric, Mary, and Stefan for joining us on this panel. So I thought I'd set the stage for this panel with some developments that happened in the last year that are very relevant for what we're about to talk about. So as many of you know, this past May actually marked the 10th anniversary of Bitcoin Pizza Day, on which 2 pizzas were actually purchased for 10,000 Bitcoin, now worth quite a bit. I think when I last wrote my notes here, it was 130 million, obviously a lot more now. I think close to $170 million. So that is 2 very expensive pizzas, but also this showed both the potential and the risk in using crypto for daily purchases. And then I think the second thing I'd want to point out is something that happened a little earlier in 2019, where crypto skeptic Felix Salmon from Axios actually made a bet against crypto bull Ben Horowitz. Basically Ben felt that they renewed a bet they originally made in 2014. In 2014, Ben felt that at least 10% of U.S. transactions, for goods in the U.S., goods or services in the U.S. would be going through Bitcoin. And he thought that would happen by 2019. That did not happen, but rather than actually consume the bet, they actually renewed the bet. But Ben made a really interesting point. He said, I'll renew the bet, but on one condition, and that is that we don't talk about Bitcoin, but rather crypto in general. And we don't talk about the US where debit and credit cards are super convenient, but we actually talk about emerging markets like Mexico. And I actually think that is a fantastic starting off point for us in terms of thinking of the potential for using digital assets for merchants. So maybe to start off, I would love to have each of you, starting with Eric, introduce yourselves and talk about what your business does, how involved you are in using Stellar or crypto for merchant payments, and what asset specifically in country you're active in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the great intro. So my name is Eric Kriske. I'm the CEO of Badali. So we're based up in Canada, but we service businesses and individuals globally because of crypto. And we actually started off, I think like probably most businesses in the crypto space, we started off in it because we saw the potential of how Bitcoin could help with cross-border settlement and payments and so on. But we very quickly realized that there were challenges with that around volatility, speed, time to settlement cost as well. And then obviously the places where you can actually spend it. And that's where we've been focusing a lot of our time. So right now we support, we actually pared back a bunch of our assets. We support based on usage. So we supported at one point over 175 different crypto assets for payments. We primarily work with enabling people to buy gift cards, pay bills, and do cross-border remittance using crypto assets. But where we really started to focus our effort and seen a lot of growth is in stablecoins. And specifically now, we've started to work, now that we're starting to see more liquidity in stablecoins in faster settlement chains like Stellar that are lower cost. We've started to put a lot of emphasis in that. So we recently actually rolled out a mobile app where people can do this peer-to-peer and send money to each other anywhere in the world and redeem their balance for gift cards in 150 different countries with over 1,500 different providers. And the incentive there too is money settles instantly and people can use it. So to the previous panel's point, we're removing some of the hops that need to happen. And as a result, we're able to reward users by giving them cash back as well.
That's great. Thank you. Mary?
Thank you, Mark. How are you? So my name is Mary. I am the CFO of Sedan Network. And Settle essentially focuses on cross-border digital assets settlements across Latin America. We are live in Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Soon in more countries in LATAM. We'll share with you later. We provide fiat on and off ramp for many exchanges and wallets. Think about OKX, Bithumb, etc. And we also have, together with Stellar, all of the anchors in Latin America. So far, Argentina and Brazil are live, and we are launching Argentina and Brazil stablecoins.
That's great. And obviously very focused on supporting Vibrant, which is used heavily in Argentina.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Stefan?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So my name is Stefan. I'm a co-founder of CoinQuest. And yeah, CoinQuest is basically an enterprise crypto payment gateway, and where we provide a solution to online merchants and e-commerce shops to accept cryptos from their customers and directly settle international currency, like for example, US dollars or euros, right? On our platform, we do not only provide actually the financial transaction itself, but also quite a number of tools to facilitate accounting and declaring taxes for the merchants. So think about questions they might have, like how do I account for incoming crypto payments? Where do they come from and what are they used for? And how do I actually handle all kinds of payment exceptions that might arise when accepting crypto, right? On top of that, we also provide protection from currency volatility for the merchants. Like just think about a short, very simple example. If a merchant has an online shop, sells a t-shirt for $20 US dollars, and the customer decides to pay in Bitcoin, then the merchant will receive $20 US dollars guaranteed. Yeah, but what else? I mean, we've been live for about 6 months now. We're able to establish some business relationships. It took us actually quite 2 years to build a product. We had a very strong focus on building a very solid core product and a payment engine, because we think when it comes to payments and financial topics, this is really very important. And yeah, technically, we are completely built on the Stellar network, and we utilize anchors for US dollars, euro, Nigerian naira, and Brazilian real on the settlement side, and most common crypto assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum on the consumer checkout side.
That's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, I just want to basically sum it up. If you think what is our main goal, then I would say that our goal is to take away the uncertainty and the risks that merchant and decision makers might have in terms of accepting Bitcoin, and help them embrace technology to offer a payment option to those that actually want to pay in an alternative way. Think about millennials, and those that need to do so, like the unbanked and underbanked.
Yeah, and so maybe if I can ask you, and maybe we'll just go the other way around, and Mary and Eric, I'll come to you next with the same question. I would love to understand, in your go-to-market, you've been going to market over the last 6 months, and I'm sure you've had to ask the question and answer the question of why. Why would a merchant want to use this versus their existing point of sale system? Why would a consumer want to use this particular rail? And I'm wondering what your journey has been there, what your experience has been, and how we can, in general, drive more adoption, considering there's this chicken and egg dynamic.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. I think we're still in the experimental phase here, definitely, like collecting feedback actually from the market. I think the message to the merchant is definitely that there is an upside on the marketing and business side. Also, when you think about upcoming demographic development, I think that merchants can increase their revenue by catering to new target groups. Think about those that are born in the digital or into the digital and mobile age and grown up actually with their mobile phone, use services on the mobile phone, and also financial services and banking. For them, it's just natural to pay digitally and with crypto. Yeah, there's also some research has been made that those who pay with crypto actually have higher average order volumes, which is beneficial for merchants. And yeah, there are other economic factors. Think about like a merchant could increase the prepayment rate. We did actually in some kind of annual reports from payment providers where they see that as a strategic benefit for their business to increase that rate. At the same time, basically reduce chargeback rates and reduce transaction costs, yeah, in general.
And what are you telling your potential merchants in terms of reduction in transaction costs? It seems like that's a fairly significant selling point.
Yeah, so basically at CoinQuest, we charge, depending on the transaction volume, like 0.5 to 1% a fee. And this is obviously considerable less than what they pay for more traditional payment providers.
Right, which is, if I understand correctly, about 2.5 to 3.5%, depending on the provider, right? So that's a fairly significant change in margin. That's especially in a low margin retail business. Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, from Latin American perspective, we have seen a little bit different reasons why merchants and users want to access crypto, right? And use it for payments on a daily basis. So it's more, the incentive is not so much on conversion or getting more, from a marketing perspective, as Stefan said, which is, it is quite right in other places, in particular in Latin America. We have a contextual situation from an economic and political standpoint where we see a lot of inflation, specifically now during COVID. COVID has been triggering a lot of people to look for alternative ways of sending money to and from abroad. Latin America in particular is one of the largest cross-border and remittance markets in the world because you have so many countries lined up next to each other with kind of the same culture, the same language. From Mexico to Argentina, it's either Spanish or Portuguese mainly. And then the incentive is more driven towards, I need to send money to my family, number one. Number two, merchants saying, okay, now people don't have access to banks. Banks have been closed. Lockdowns have been very long here in LATAM. Banks have been closed. So people are trying to find a way to use their cash and digitalize it in any way they can in order to use it as they would in purchases, online purchases, etc. We are not so used, and this is a great point you brought before. In the US, we have Venmo. Hey, send me money from New York to California, I'll Venmo you. Here in Latin America, we don't have this, and we don't have it even in the same country. And with banking restrictions, it's more complicated. So the incentive comes from this side, right? COVID, inflation, economic and political volatility, and all of these banking, restrictions and all of this regulation.
And I'm wondering if there's something about the informal economy we should think about, especially in, let's say, the Latin American markets, right? Where often in the US, we think of point of sale transactions, we think of gift cards, we think of a terminal, we think of going into a store, but really a lot of transactions in emerging markets happen in stalls in the market where people are just using mobile devices, right? And so I wonder if there's an opportunity there, especially considering people have value in their wallets from remittances.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, let me give you a little bit more background. In Argentina, for example, you can pay Uber with cash. It's such a cash-based economy that if the pandemic caught you with a lot of cash and banks are closed, then your other option is coming to Sedan Network, or we are one of those where you can actually send fiat money and we can turn it into crypto stable coins so that then you can be more free to move around money, right? You can choose whether you want to pay Uber in cash, and everything is very cash based. So having this little options here and there right now during pandemic to digitalize money in terms of crypto has become so prevalent. And right now, with all the distrust there is on banking rails, on banks in general, on the financial institutions, then all of this informal, the informal economy, people that don't have bank accounts are either just doing the leap, just taking the leap and going from cash to crypto, not even bank accounts.
Yeah, and I think we saw the example in India with demonetization, where people adopted Paytm very quickly because they had to do day-to-day transactions digitally, and they simply couldn't get access to cash. So I think that's a fantastic point. Eric, so I'd love your point of view on what the use cases are and how we actually break the chicken and egg dynamic.
Yeah, I think, to what Mary and Stefan said, a lot of it is, we've thought about a lot of the same things and heard and seen a lot of the same things. I think ultimately it does become a chicken and egg problem though, right? Because even if I can send money to somebody else, and this was Bitcoin kind of enabled this better peer-to-peer cash-based system, and it's had its challenges in terms of cost and efficiency and so on. But that was the the very first stab at it that I think has worked really, really well. But the challenge that we still see is unless it's cost effective and easy and better than the current alternatives, regardless of where you are in the world, to actually use that to pay for the goods and services that you need to pay for in order to live, particularly in these cash-based economies where people are going, the hand-to-mouth kind of model, or where people are earning on the day, spending it through the day, earning again, spending again, and don't necessarily have a bank account. That's a tough nut to crack. And our approach so far has been, like any marketplace, you need to build up one side and build up the other side. I think to what Reid Hoffman has spoken a lot about is how do you crack those network effects? And part of it is, on the supply side. And that's where we spend a lot of our time working with merchants to offer something familiar, particularly global merchants where it's already been hard to work with them within, if you're branded as a crypto business, to enable people to convert these stores of value, whether it's Bitcoin or a stable coin running on Stellar, to a gift card that they can redeem very, very easily and quickly. And now, as a result, we had to build out our own payment stack, very similar to Stefan, over the last few years, in order to remove that volatility for the consumer and for the merchant and ourselves as well, and improve the efficiency gains there in terms of even accounting, like all of these barriers we've had to deal with ourselves by being our own merchant kind of in the middle of this process. And so now we're starting to bridge into working directly with merchants and offering payment solutions and prepaid solutions so that we can offer kind of the same thing, but on a more efficient digital level. Because I think there'll be some sort of inflection point where you have enough supply or enough places that you can spend cryptocurrency efficiently and easily that all of a sudden it happens very slowly, and then it'll just tip, because it will be useful for people. And this is typical with any adoption cycle or adoption curve anyways. And we're still very early in the crypto adoption curve, but I think you're seeing bits of that now, where as people are layering on these ability to, with Settle Network adding stablecoin partnerships and the ability to settle to your bank or settle to cash or vice versa, and giving people this optionality, we'll start to see it really accelerate, I think, over the next few years. Because ultimately what it comes down to is optionality, and that's where we've been, where we think crypto really, outside of the efficiency benefits, and what got us into it and excited about it was seeing the problems and currently still even some of the people we employ, the problems that they're having in Latin America and Africa around trust, and even just the choice of what currency to transact in, what payment method to transact in. That's incredibly powerful. And right now that's a barrier to people being able to contribute to the global economy that I think needs to be solved.
That's great. And I have one more question for you, but I wanted to let the audience know that I would love to ask your questions. And if you go in the Q&A tab on the top of the screen, above the chat, and ask your question, I'll be able to see it. I won't be able to see the questions in the chat, by the way. And so, yeah, my question for you, Eric, is you're talking about how there's this potential network effect, but you are in this fairly mature economy, right? You're obviously have a lot of activity, if I understand correctly, in developed economies. So what are the numbers? Like, why would a consumer adopt your system? Why would a merchant adopt them? Do they save money? Do they make more money? What's your pitch to the consumer and the merchant?
Yeah, I think, our pitch right now, where we've seen most of our growth and where we've spent most of our time is in enabling people to convert cryptocurrency, so these other stores of value, to more, I would say, traditional stores of value. So whether that's cash or, in this case, prepaid stored value credit at businesses. And so we knew kind of going in that the cryptocurrency crowd, let's say, myself included, are early adopters of technology, but also acutely aware of the financial ecosystem a bit more than the mainstream, and also tend to face some of these challenges. So the pain is a little bit higher for some of these people. And so a lot of the people that we service, like a lot of the volume that we see, tends to be remittance or people buying because, they've earned cryptocurrency in some fashion, whether they've earned it overseas by working abroad via, Fiverr or some independent platform, or they've made it off of earning interest in DeFi, or they are speculating and making money off that, and it's a quick way to convert that's cost effective. So, and to lock in those gains, or in some cases lock in those, the downside as a hedge. So that's where we've seen most of it today, but where we're really, like, over the last few years, but where we're really pushing now, I'd say with the new mobile app, is bringing this more to a mainstream audience. And that required a lot of work, a lot of trust, a lot of technical development as well, to make sure that the system works well. Because what we've started to see now, especially over the last 9 months, is that people have now become dependent on our service to pay for, food. And I'll give you a quick example. We even had one person during COVID who was trapped overseas. His wife was in the hospital delivering their baby, and he used our service with Bitcoin to convert to a gift card, an Amazon gift card, so that she could get the supplies that she needed delivered to the hospital, because she didn't have anybody, including her husband, to be able to help her out. And I think those are it blew us away, because those are the things that you realize can be achieved by now having a more open, more efficient, accessible system, and giving people
I totally
choice.
agree. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic real world story. Mary, we have a question from the audience for you. Can I buy USD stablecoin with ARST stablecoin?
Yes, you can. And I want to talk a little bit about, actually, Eric, is funny you mentioned this particular case. We've had not a similar situation, but here in Latin America, we're receiving a lot of immigration, a lot of people from Venezuela coming to look for a job here in Argentina. I'm in Argentina right now, and they come with crypto. A lot of people come with crypto that they've gained somewhere else. Either they work remotely, et cetera, and we have been providing this off-ramp for them. But now with Vibrant, and I'm very happy to talk about this, that Mark previously mentioned, with Vibrant, now having the app for consumers and having the option just to bring it to ARST and keep it digital. It's a great way for them just not to depend on opening a bank account, which are closed, or being an immigrant, it's very hard to open a bank account. I lived in London, in the US, and in Paris, and it's very, very hard to open a bank account. They need either the proof of address, but then how do you get an apartment without a bank account? So it's, again, another type of chicken and egg problem that you have. And yeah.
I wanted to add something to that. I think the thing around choice as well that we've identified is really important, particularly in Argentina, Venezuela, and other countries where they've faced distrust in government or hyperinflation, or the banking system, is what we feel is really, really interesting about cryptocurrency is that, sure, we have other crypto assets that people may say is a hedge against inflation, but ultimately, when we've done a bunch of research and spoken with people, right now, they're still looking for US dollar, because they're looking for safety in comparison to their existing currency. And what crypto enables now today is the ability for people to have a multi-currency bank account, where the funds, even if they're backed one for one, like with Circle, they're stored in a more trusted, more regulated, more stable government environment that they can rely on compared to their existing government or financial infrastructure, and particularly one that has more liquidity. And that is also super important, because now, effectively, in some of these markets, anybody with a mobile device now can have a multi-currency offshore bank account, which is a mind-blowing thing, because typically that's been only reserved for the ultra wealthy.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it to you, Stefan, on that point. I'm wondering, I mean, you obviously operate, it seems you operate with USD, Euro, and Naira on Stellar with your product, right? Which is very impressive. Do you see that dynamic where people with multi-currency accounts are using this? Do you know? And also, I'm just wondering more in general, what do you see as the biggest barriers and accelerants to the growth of your business?
Well, in terms of barriers, I would say, and I think we have heard that a lot during this event already, that there's actually quite still unclear regulatory requirements for everyone, for us as a company, as a crypto company, but likewise also for the merchants. So we have heard voices from merchants who say, okay, we're not looking into accepting crypto at the moment because we don't actually have certainty on the regulatory side, and we do not know what will actually our bank do if we receive our funds from a crypto exchange. Will it actually close the bank account or not, right? So yeah, I think what we can do, we can try to educate and showcase the benefits, but it takes quite a bit of time and efforts. And yeah, on the regulatory side, I think there's quite some things to do still.
I can imagine. And do you see mobile money having a big impact on your business?
At the moment, we actually, let's say like this, we focus very much on the merchant side. So we actually see basically where the money is coming in, but basically we cannot really say basically from what wallet or it's coming from.
Right. And so maybe we have about 2 minutes left. I just wanted to close with, the same bet that, Felix Salmon and Ben Horowitz made earlier on, which is, will 10% of all retail transactions go through crypto in the future? And rather than asking for a specific point in time, I was just going to ask, well, rather than asking on a specific date, I would love for you to tell us, what year do you think over 10% of retail transactions will go through crypto in your specific markets, and just name the market? I'll start with you, Eric.
Well, I think because we service everything globally, we're like maybe not the best use case, but I would say, or picking a specific country is a little bit tricky, but I would say definitely to the point that we've already made is that the highest impact and probably the quickest adoption is going to be where it provides an order of magnitude improvement and gives you better trust and optionality and lower cost and all these things.
Got it.
I think it'll happen in the next 5 years. I think, like I said, it'll happen slowly and then all at once.
2025. Okay. Mary, do you want to comment on Argentina?
Yes. So in particular, like in terms of market, I would say definitely in emerging markets. Number one. Number two, I think that I would have done the bet with stablecoin. So I don't think as the deflationary model Bitcoin has from a purely economic perspective will never, people will not use Bitcoin for these kind of purchases. So if we could change the bet and do it on stable coins.
Sure.
Yeah. So then maybe, I don't know if in 5 years, but hopefully in 5 years.
5 years. All right. 2025. Stefan?
Yeah, I would agree also on the 5 years, but however, not for Germany or the European market, but probably really also in some emerging markets. So.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And I learned a lot on this session, and I wish you the best of luck with your businesses.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you, Mary. See you.
Have a good Meridian. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, and all of our amazing panelists. I thought that was a really interesting discussion. And I think personally, I would agree with Mary as well. I could see a lot of retail to merchant transactions going through stable coins in the next 5 years. I'm certainly looking to hold on to my Bitcoin. So, but thank you. And it sounds like there's some really promising solutions being developed, even in our own ecosystem. So we've only got one session left in Meridian, which is crazy. Make sure that you're giving us our feedback in the feedback bar, especially in our last session. And then up next, we are going to have our incredible CEO, Danelle Dixon, come back to the virtual stage and wrap up Meridian with her vision for the Stellar ecosystem in 2021. And then during this break, however, Justin and I are going to come together one last time to announce the hackathon winners. So you definitely don't want to miss that. So don't go far. We will be back shortly with the hackathon results.
Hey, Meridian. What am I doing over here on the biz track? I'm here to announce our hackathon finalists, but first I just want to say, hi, Lisa, how's it going?
Hi, Justin. I haven't seen you in so long. It's going well. How's it going over there?
Great. It's been a really great couple of days. I've heard a lot of great stuff. I just heard the SDF engineering roadmap. It was pretty amazing. There's so many great things coming up. In addition, obviously, to all of the things that we've been talking about and all the things that are going on at SDF, Stellar is really out there so that people can build on it. And there's a whole new generation of developers who are trying stuff out. And to encourage them, and as part of this year's Meridian, we hosted a hackathon. Now, this is the Hackathon Awards session. So if you don't already know about the hackathon, it challenged old hands and newcomers alike to build a project on the testnet incorporating at least one of the 4 new features introduced to the Stellar protocol in 2020. I think we have some slides to show too.
Yes.
As we walk through this. Somebody, are they up?
Yeah, I think we're pulling them up in just a second, Justin.
Great, awesome. So, yeah, so as long as developers basically implemented at least one of the new features that was introduced to the protocol in 2020, they could build anything they wanted, right? Now, it's worth noting those features are new to everyone. Several aren't even available yet on the public network, although they likely will be on Monday after validators vote on the Protocol 15 upgrade. Quick note, please, please, please update your software before then. Trust me, you will thank me if you do. So we were interested in seeing intuitive and user-friendly products that explore the possibilities that the new features open up. So we asked them to build something. The catch, they only had 10 days to do it. And so we left it up to you, Meridian, to decide on the winner and to determine how to allocate the $12,000 worth of Lumens in prizes. So all week, we've been asking you to head to the hackathon page and cast your vote. And I hope you did, because democracy. Democracy worked. We tallied the votes. I'm told we have our winner. We're going to start with 5th place and work our way all the way to 1st. So without further ado, I really wish I could get Questlove for this to do a drum roll, but drum roll, please. In 5th place. 5th place goes to Weris, which aims to promote financial planning and management by making claimable funds self-manageable, easy, and safe. 5th place goes to Weris. Woo! In 4th place, drum roll please. 4th place goes to Meza. Meza makes it easy for chamas to keep their financial records in check and helps them stay up and running during the pandemic. Congratulations, Meza. 3rd place goes to Pagas. Pagas is an online platform that facilitates the sale of products by creators directly to consumers using Stellar. Very handy. You ready for our 2nd place winner? In 2nd place, drum roll please. Blockbill. Blockbill is a decentralized blockchain expense management system for personal and business expenses powered by the Stellar Network. And finally, our number 1 top prize goes to Intrip. Intrip enables offline payments for traveling anywhere in India for the masses. It's completely cashless and contactless for the post-COVID-19 Indian travel economy. So that's it for our hackathon. Thanks so much for voting. Thanks for everyone who participated and submitted a project. There were tons and tons and tons of great projects, and they really showed what you can do with some of Stellar's new features. And that's it for the hackathon. And now, sadly, day 4 of Meridian is coming to a close. It is definitely bittersweet. It feels like a good time to reflect a bit on what we've learned and to talk about where we're going. It is time for Lisa and I to say goodbye. And I also want to say that we've had an incredible time with you, and to hand the stage over for that final reflection to our CEO and Executive Director, Danelle Dixon, who's going to share her parting words for this week. Danelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin and Lisa. And I think you guys need to take some lessons from the Roots on how to drum, because everything was awesome about that whole presentation except for the drumming. So thank you, guys. We're going to get started on the conclusion of our 2020 virtual Meridian. So we're going to get the slides up in just a second. There we go. So first off, this week, wow, We are so grateful for all of you that joined us and all of the speakers that told their stories and made Meridian come to life. We had 2,000 registrants from 79 countries. We might have been virtual, but it didn't stop all of you from engaging. You sent more than 3,000 chat messages, submitted 720 quiz responses, submitted 300 questions. We've gotten to jam during the session breaks with the Roots, unwind with Mixology, play games together on Twitch, yoga and meditation, and just hanging out together virtually. The team that put this together for us at SDF is amazing and deserves so much thanks. Lauren, Jordan, Aditi, Caroline, Zach, Anka, and Mihan. And you may not know their faces, but you see their work. It's been phenomenal. And thanks to the leaders of our ecosystem team, Justin and Lisa, for providing the roadmap for us throughout the week. You all tuned into over 90 speakers, 45 sessions with so many fascinating insights about how we create global connections to solve real world challenges. Many of our speakers left me so inspired. From Jim Kim, the former president of the World Bank, who said, "There's no question that access to financial services, access to platforms like Stellar are going to be a critical part of opening up the world." And he was confident that our technology would be invaluable to international organizations like the World Bank, which is a perfect segue into my panel with Stella McCann from the World Bank Group, who shared how from our own exploration with blockchain and the Stellar Development Foundation, we looked into how blockchain can help us improve traceability and visibility into our own World Bank loan disbursements. This learning is very important for us, and we're sharing it with our client countries, other teams across the bank, and other colleagues in the ecosystem. And we heard from leading innovators like Sir Tim Berners-Lee about building systems with intention, as he emphasized the motivation of these systems, of course, is not building systems for the sake of systems. Rather, when I think about the future, I want us to build apps that promote science and democracy and trust and inclusion. And speaking of inclusion, we had President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Africa's first elected female president and winner of the Nobel Prize, talking about how important it is to solve remittances to empower the marginalized. She said, "Remittances transferred from the global north to the south go to such a high price. And at the same time, capital flow from underdeveloped countries to the rich countries and leaves the countries from which these resources flow in a state where they can't sustain themselves and financial systems do not grow enough." One of the major highlights for me, was the amazing use cases that we highlighted this week. And as I talked about on Monday, Stellar powers each of these entities and so many more as they are solving the prevalent needs in their regional markets. Each of these entities from all parts of the world comprise our ecosystem and are part of the solution that we are collectively building as we seek to achieve a world in which where you live and what you have no longer prohibit you from participating in the financial system. It's simple. Equitable access is not a privilege, it's a right. And at Meridian, we have showcased not the promise of blockchain, which is what everyone always talks about, but rather we showcase the achievements blockchain has already made, solving real world problems with global connections. And that's what Stellar was created for and what SDF was set up to support. And so now I want to remind you of SDF's role. I want to remind you of who we are and what we do so that each of you can not only engage with us, but can hold us accountable to our words and to our work. We are a nonprofit, non-stock Delaware corporation. Not having shareholders is important to us because we are not beholden to any person or group. We are focused and beholden only to our mission. We're not a charity. We pay taxes to the US and to the state of California. And we use the capital and the assets that we have to make Stellar a success, to ultimately achieve our mission, creating equitable access to the global financial system. We named our annual conference Meridian for a reason. We are like a meridian. We're not at the center of this ecosystem or of Stellar. We are not the focal point. All of you are. Rather, we are connecting the shining lights, all of you around the globe, like a Meridian does on a world map. We act as a convener and an aggregator of information, supporting what you're doing on the network through advocacy, relationship building, and proposals about the code base. Our work reflects the momentum and changes inherent in a growing, living network. And as I shared with you last year, our work has been focused around 3 primary pillars. These pillars help to guide our work at SDF and help us to ensure that we are continuing to work towards a larger strategy. And 2020, well, it found us working hard to live up to the goals that we set around each pillar. Now, the words on this slide don't really reflect the effort, the impact, and the results we worked hard to achieve in 2020, but it highlights some of the work that we did in our pursuit of growing this network. This is obviously not all of the work. We added anchors in regions all over the world and put attention towards making integration on the network simple and easy, which supported the strong growth in the use cases and usage of the network. And I told you last year, when I was standing in Mexico City at Meridian, that 2020 was going to be Stellar's year. And we've seen such tremendous growth of the network. So let's start with a look at the network, what it looked like in 2019. And now let's see how it's grown to today. None of this is possible without each of you. The work that you're doing and the trust that you put into the network, and collectively, we should all celebrate this movement. This slide shows the increase of each statistic that we look at to determine the health and growth of the network. An increase in total accounts, total payments, total assets, and total operation. It really is important to celebrate these increases as they show that the activity is on the rise and growing. And in April of 2020, we hit 1 billion operations on the network since 2015. This in and of itself is a great milestone. But when you couple that with the fact that in 2020 alone, we are on target to see over 900 million operation, it shows maturity. So while it took us some time to hit that 1 billion number, it now seems that we may be on track to do that on an annual basis. And in the end of 2019, we began looking at what we call meaningful assets on the network, which we defined as an asset tethered to a real financial instrument. This was just another key performance indicator for us that we wanted to watch over the course of the year to help us assess whether it is an indicator of real growth. And we now think it is. Meaningful assets. We've gone from 49 to 79, a 61% growth. And some of that growth is coming from our anchors. We have now 25 anchors live on the network. And they are driving 5x more meaningful asset volume today than we saw at the same time last year at Meridian. And when our ecosystem grows, so do we at SDF. At the beginning of 2019, we were 12 employees strong, and we were from 3 different countries. We grew a lot in 2019, yet we grew methodically and rationally, focusing on the talent that we needed to support the needs of the ecosystem and the growth of the network. And in 2020, we are closing the year just under 80 employees in 10 different countries as we stretch ourselves to support the needs of many of you and the future participants in our ecosystem. We need to make sure that we don't stop focusing on the future needs of the network, so that we can support what we see happening today on the network and are building for what we see coming down the pike. Each and every one of the employees that we have at SDF are here because they are committed to the mission and they want to work to make this network even more of a success. So what does success look like? The $10,000 or $1 million question? Well, achieving our goals is one way to be successful, and we have massive goals. We constantly try to focus on the mission, creating equitable access to the global financial system, which is something that is not achievable overnight, but can be achieved in bite-sized chunks. And that's how we look at our annual strategy work and how we also peg our work against our 2025 goal, which is to be the global payment standard, interoperable with the financial system and enhancing its work to support an ever-growing body of use cases. So we took some stock where we are this year, and then we focused on where we need to be in 2021 in order to move us even closer to our goals and our mission. We know that we need to continue to build the anchor network. We know that we need to continue to support and grow more use cases. And we know that we need to make sure that the network continues to be able to scale. But we don't know everything. So we pulled together some Tiger teams focused on researching and understanding, and we developed more questions and some answers. First, on DEX liquidity. Second, on what are the most common use cases on Stellar. Third, whether we need to reconsider how we approach network participation and running nodes and validators. Fourth, the existential risks to Stellar. And there are many, and some are big. And finally, how we should approach the geographic focus. So we formed some initial conclusions around each of these topics. First, on DEX liquidity, we decided that we need to tackle this in 2021. And at the least, at a first blush, we didn't think we needed to make changes to core to do so. While this may be part of the solution, we can analyze that as we focus on other options. So next, on the use case piece, we concluded that the most common use cases that we are going to see in 2021 are business-to-business cross-border payments, customer-to-customer cross-border payments, USD savings and tokenized assets, and securitized assets. And then also towards the end of the year and maybe into 2022, we'll see more digital cash and payment processing. We believe the network is in a great place with respect to B2B and C2C cross-border payments, and with respect to savings and tokenized assets and securitized assets. But we think we have some work to do for the digital cash and payment processing. So we developed this SideNet project that I'll talk about in just a bit. And on network participation, we concluded that we need to continue our work at engaging with those who run nodes and validators, thank you, by the way, and listen to them and respond to them and then continue to grow that base, but that we're generally in a good spot as we approach 2021. And on the existential risks, well, as with any network, with any software, with any platform, there are many. But we have taken to focus on these around the code and ensuring that we consistently protect and test it. And finally, with respect to geographies, we need to grow from what we have, but we need to grow in a way that supports the current geographies and pairs them nicely with other geographies that will work well with them. And so after all of that work that we did on our strategy internally, we concluded that all of the current work and the work that we need to do in 21 still lines up to support these three pillars. And I want to highlight a few pieces of that work so that you know what we're tackling in 2021. So we have already seen some of this work in Protocol 15, where we're focused on ensuring the robustness and usability of Stellar, but focusing on the technical requirements of the top use cases. So that work that we've already seen with claimable balances and sponsored reserves, that work was brought on by listening to the needs in the use cases we already have. So we'll continue to consider those needs as we work with other participants in the ecosystem and as more and more of these use cases are developed. And then with respect to DEX liquidity, it's important. We've heard you. It's the one constant that I hear from you time and time again. And I want you to know that we're listening. We believe that the Stellar DEX is such an important part of what Stellar has to offer, and we need to focus on how to make it even more user-friendly. We have these options that we're going to consider, which we're going to continue to integrate with OTC solutions. We're going to explore if the network is able to use and support automated market makers. And then we're also going to consider other fiat local fiat deposit and savings options. So we're going to look at these, and we're going to continue to see if there are other changes that need to be made. Importantly, this is one of our top priorities for 2021. And then with respect to the setup, making sure that we're set up for growth, we always need to be focused on scaling as volume increases. This year will be no different for us in that. The work that we do on the network today is for the future, just like the work that we did on the network last year is for now. We constantly have to be working towards the needs of tomorrow. And that's why we also see that one of the scaling requirements is to ensure that Stellar can support use cases with high transaction throughput and that may have the need for some privacy. So we're focusing on developing a SideNet or a private ledger. We're welcome the naming options. Maybe we're not so good at the names. That has interoperability with Stellar, so that you can move payments from the mainnet to the sidenet and accounts and vice versa, and has the possibility to be run privately to accommodate certain use cases and regulation. We're focusing on having an MVP in early 2021 and a full production solution by the end of year 2021. And one of the important pillars is being the blockchain that people know and trust. And we keep hearing that in the US, we see companies flee this market because of unstable landscape. I can't tell whether this is actually happening, but importantly, we would like to see the US, just like global policy, create stability and foster growth in blockchain. And we're going to use our tools to advocate for legislation that helps eliminate that urgency that we hear. This will also help us to get Stellar itself to become more broadly known in US policy. This doesn't mean that we aren't focused elsewhere, because we are. We would also just like to support policy needs in our own backyard. And then also, we made 3 investments this year from the Enterprise Fund. And we've brought some new participants and ideas onto Stellar. And we're going to continue to flesh out our investment criteria and investment thesis and work to support more breadth in the ecosystem using the fund. It's a great way to create, and it helps with that virtuous circle. So we'll continue our work there as well. And this one area, which may not seem to be at the top of the list, but it does feel right for me, in that we need to create deeper channel partnerships with consulting firms that advise governments and financial institutions about blockchain. We think that this can help make it easier for those firms to support integration work on Stellar. And so we're going to put some attention to that in 2021. And then importantly, we think fostering sustainable use cases, one of the important pillars that we have, is also in some of our work in Vibrant. So we're going to significantly increase and focus on the significant increase of our user base with Vibrant. And then we also intend to add at least 1 new market and add at least 1 new feature in 2021. And with respect to the fostering sustainable use cases, as I mentioned, meaningful transactions on Stellar really support that. And so as we saw this year, growing meaningful assets through our anchor partnerships grows meaningful transactions on Stellar. So we would like to see that 5x growth of the meaningful asset transactions and at least 4 additional corridors active and strong by the end of 2021. This means we need to grow Stellar, but mostly we need to work to grow our anchor network and those that are leveraging these meaningful assets. So that'll be a big focus of our work with respect to use cases. And that's how we'll keep lighting up the Stellar map. This is our 2021 strategy. Our goal is to keep providing the energy to light up the map. I look forward to looking at this map next year to see how much it glows. So I want to thank all of you for attending this week. That's it for us here, live from Meridian. But there's still plenty of networking to be done. So please take advantage of connecting with your fellow attendees. And let's wrap this up with some entertainment from the Roots. Thank you all again for caring about Stellar, for participating in Meridian, and enjoy your time.
Meridian. I hope you all are enjoying this conference. Just to let you know, it's the legendary Roots crew. I hope you all been enjoying us. We're gonna hit you over a few more. Let's go. Ain't it? Check it out, y'all. and it weighs a ton. VG's everybody, I'm a son of a gun. Black master of any trade under the sun. Talk sharp like a razor blade under the tongue. Clear my path and come get your captain hung. Trying to breathe like black, I collapse your lung. Young chump, you can choke off the web I spun. I done cleared them out with the thread I brung. You done heard about what said I'm from. What is it? Word of mouth, little rule of thumb. Y'all better bow down, here the ruler come. I'm a legend in the hood, not a hoodlum. How thought, put it down, be confusing. Some of y'all cats can't walk while chewing your gumming off. What a keyboard gotta do with a drumming off. School them on stage like I'm doing a seminar. Up and tight, I'm adjusting my mic. Go to war, kid, I give you when you grab me your life. Give you something to run from, bust off them dum-dum. Stop it, the hotness, here's where it come from. Philly worldwide phenomenon. Reinforcing that thing in my 9 to 5. When I finish making them recognize, I'm getting at a few civilized women who trying to ride. You've been waiting on the board to come off the oar. You wanna get the joints up off the wall. Just to see you smile and enjoy yourself. Keeping you in health, it's for all of y'all. I'm quick on the draw like Black McGraw. Can't tell what y'all cats rapping for. My name? Big G's and I'm back for more. See me getting more chips in a corner store. Got a portrait of Malcolm up on my wall. And I'm eating MCs like a carnivore. Matter of fact, yo, we's back till you get hard. Reno Warren and horn when I'm gonna perform. The first thing to move or disturb the groove. I'ma have y'all flicks on the evening news. Play y'all part, get on y'all P's and Q's. And when y'all think thought, be prepared to lose and bring money to spend and money to lend. Bring worthwhile money, no 20s and 10s get took for your tuck right in front of your hands. Who could have helped you? It ain't none of your friends because I put the black fist under your chin. Your physical remains found under the pen. From coming up in a place, I'm coming to win. Born in the 4 minute, now I'm dumbing again. Re-G, y'all can chat with y'all please, but see what I'm gonna get back to y'all please. You don't really wanna get clapped with all these. You can take y'all strap when y'all leave. See the squad coming to place, they all freeze. Ice cold with his mellow cool breeze. MCs never showed loyalty yet. Who hurt ain't never get a broady check. I do work, no question, and bomb your set. Calm, collect, sharp like my name Gillette. R.I.P. my main Gillette. Till I touch the mic, people ain't seen danger yet. Well, I'm a decorated vet, I got a regulated wreck. I never hesitated yet, I'm getting heavyweighted check. For you to dare ask, am I dedicated yet? What I spit is live rounds and a meditate a vest. Listen, take your seats, I demonstrate a test. How to freak the beat so gangster fresh and it dump. From the East Coast way out west, Big Bank Willie from Philly. We the best! It ain't over yet. I don't even feel like I'm not sober yet. It ring like shots in the projects, New Year's Eve, but it ain't even October yet. I'm a big bounty hunter like Boba Fett. Y'all more shell shocked than a soldier yet. It's the prize in my sights, I'm going for this. The roots are the ultimate, and I'm the cope of it. I want the bulk of it. You want me to set it on a magnetic ultra tip. I get down how I'm supposed to get. I got nothing to lose. I'm killing it with no regrets. I'm like young LL. I'm hard as hell. Make the screw face like Gargamel. We all out on our own like Patty LaBelle. If you want the force of the Lord to raise the hell, let's go! Yeah. All right. Yeah. What you looking for? She's my dancing girl. Yeah. She's my big leg woman. She's my dancing girl. Dancing girl. She's my dancing Come on. Girl. I'm looking for the party people. I'm looking for the party people. The party people who love to get down. The party people that love to get down. Looking for the party people. I'm looking for the party people. Party people who love to get down. All my party people that love to get down. Let's go. I'm looking for the party people. 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 The party people that love to get down. That is. Let's do it. Oh, come on, let's jam. Let's do it. Word up. Let's do it, man. It's all right. Stella Meridian. I want to thank you all for having us. All right. Yeah. Cheaper, y'all. Hey. Knocked up 9 months ago. What you finna ask? She don't know. She want neo songs and pop songs. She don't want no rock and roll, bro. She want platinum or icy gold. In a whole lot of snow in the fall. If you are icicle, she's driving cold. One, you don't stop the show. Do the Mary's bad. She done ran ever since when the heat began. Got a girl up here. Fall back, I hold your hand. I'll name you the piece to play. You pick to learn. We can make money to burn if you allow me to let this game out there some money. All these rules are my way. The world minute of my name. I don't yeah. For much these days. And I don't bitch and why if I don't get my way. What you had to do? I only wanna do it. Fertilize another beyond my lover's back. All right. Sit and watch it go wrong from a web man. Yeah. Fertilize another beyond my lover's back. Yeah. And I'm keeping my secrets mine. Oh. I push my seat in the bush for life. It's gonna work it 'cause I'm pushing it right. Mary, try my baby girl tonight. I will name rock and roll. That's why there's rock and roll. Up top of the people, come on. Say, can I get a soul clap? Everybody clap your hands. All right, and rockin' music, and rockin' music, and rockin' music. Say, that guy like he straight to wrong. Man, when I hit the post, she ain't even know. But I'm in the city where the post shake, rally and roll. I'm a hot day rolling stone. I don't need big, I can hold my own. I don't need brick, I can hold that crown. Ain't in brand a ton, I'm a son of a gun. My code name the only one, Black Gold is bad. These streets I done ran. Since when the game began, never played the fool. Matter of fact, I've been keeping it cool since money been changing hands. And I'm ready to shine. They can see I leave behind. You see the keep playing. I'm dancing much, but room to sweat my way. You and my name. I don't care from no rich man. No Lord, and I don't scream and kick. I just don't pull in my hand, man. Cause I know how to steal. Fertilize another against my lover's will. I live the opposition cause she got the head. That's why I love as well. Ooh,